Welcome to Volya Radio. Slava Ukraini!
Hello. Will, you beat me in here again. Uh, welcome everybody. Let's see, it is December 1st. We're into December. It's December 1st, 6:59 p.m. in New York, Eastern Time. And I don't know, it must be about what, 7:59 a.m. in the workers' paradise. Is that right? Okay, good. Hi, I got it right. Okay. Adam will be with us in a minute. Welcome everybody to Volya Radio. Um, it's a lot going on in the day today, so we'll be discussing all sorts of things. Very excited to see what's going on in Georgia. I think that's probably going to be one of our first topics. But anyway, welcome, Adam. Dobry wieczór.
Dobry wieczór. Jak sprawy? Все справедливо? I will take that as a yes, and I will answer Lexicon's request here. And welcome to Book Club, folks, and Cultural Hour, and cheering on heroic Georgians fighting their terrible Russified, Russo-phallic government. Gosh darn it.
That's a word. I was going to say
It is now.
Let's say Russo fascist, but yeah, that works too. Yeah, I must say, the more I read about this, the more I'm seeing a mirroring of the Maidan. In fact, today there was even I saw a Twitter tweet that someone had posted from Georgia with firemen on a fire truck, and their version of the Berkut was trying to spray everybody with water in this incredibly cold winter, and the firemen were quite ostentatiously draining all the water out of the truck so they couldn't do that. And it's something I don't remember seeing exactly that on the Maidan, but you could imagine that happening. It's very interesting. I hope that Georgians get the support that they need to carry this out successfully, because they're doing themselves and all of us a favor too if they can help to weaken Russia even more. Lexicon.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for being here and hosting the space. Yeah, Georgia's so exciting. It's like they're in a hurry, change makers in a hurry. They've had to wrap the Orange Revolution and their Maidan Revolution of Dignity in one, because they don't have time to wait 10 years between events. And it's so interesting to see how the population was really riled up by the Russia Act, but they recognized that they couldn't get to everybody. It's really huge proportion of students and so on, maybe intellectuals and all this jazz. And then when the election got stolen from them, they they were frustrated. I love the way their analysis of their events and their kind of analysis of the forces involved and what the government would dare to do and what it wouldn't and so on, and their understanding of their own strength and the balance of forces as they learned things as they grew. Anyway, and then, so similar to my Dan, when the government rips away your chance at EU, then they really get mad. And it sounds like maybe I don't know about today, this past night there, but certainly they said the night before this that for the first time, they'd been able to not be dispersed in the course of the night, that the size of the protests seemed to be even growing. They amazing things they did, like seizing hold of the forcing the public broadcaster to give them some live time to show the atrocities that the cops and the regime were perpetrating. And I'm sure this helped. I mean, I'm sure they made a call to people to come and join us. Marika told us about uh, how many other cities and towns were also holding demonstrations and protests. And then the funniest thing I've heard, Steve Rosenberg on the BBC has decided to get himself to this capital, and so he interviewed the prime minister. Oh my God, this guy! So Rosenberg, they first talked to him before you hear the interview, and he says, "Now you'll be interested to hear that although definitely, the government made this statement, and of course, there's all the broadcasts, the press cons or whatever of the government saying that talks to join talks on the EU succession will be suspended until 2028. But in the interview, he pretends that no such thing ever happened, and he never said that, and nobody ever said that, and there's no suspension. So I guess that all of this citizenry has just imagined all of this, and they've just decided to go out in the streets and get sprayed with pepper spray mixed in with the water cannons, just like for fun and shits and giggles. Anyway, that was really deflabbergast, and most amusing. I thought I'd try and look it up, try and see it again. So, yeah, I think that it's really important. I think all the things going on in Russia, not to mention Russia's own internal ruble crashing and domestic cracks, that I don't know, those of us hoping for some other event. I mean, we all know the war is not going on in a vacuum and other things will happen to Russia, but it is pretty breathtaking to see them all happening to Russia. And yeah, would be fun to hear from you guys and others what you think about it, among other things going down right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lexicon. It's reminding me of, pardon me, the dildo of consequences. Um, Russia's beginning to get what it's got coming to it. I mean, it's also, don't forget about Syria. They're throwing lives of thousands and thousands of Russians and other people they've hoodwinked into it in Kursk and in Donetsk. And at the same time, things are going very badly in Syria. I think Aleppo has been taken over by rebel forces at this point. Assad has taken residence up with all the other presidents of other failed Russian client states. He and Yanukovych, maybe they can share a house. uh, and and this in Georgia also. It's wonderful to see, and I just I hope, as you're saying, with what's going on inside Russia now, this is really a perfect storm. In fact, drunken Dima Dmitry Medvedev sobered up enough to actually speak. I mean, I wouldn't say coherently, but he said something, and he's threatening again. It's so I'm very worried. He said he said in Georgia there's attempt at another color revolution. Terrible. Uh, the eccentric broad Salome, who's the president of Georgia, great respect there, uh, and is an industrious student of Zbigniew Brzezinski, failed to resign her office because she refused to recognize the election. Formerly, they used to hang on lampposts for such things, but we live high in more humane times. She dodged a bullet. And then, but afterwards, he also said that if Donald Trump tries to stop Russian aggression against Ukraine, he could be the new John F. Kennedy. This is sort of almost admitting that the Russians had something to do with the Kennedy assassination, which I thought was sort of interesting, although he was probably plowed at that point too, so I don't think he remembers. But when the worse the bluster gets out of the Russian central government there, the more you know that they're in a world of hurt, and it's very nice to see. It could not happen to nicer people. Adam.
Yes, this video won't quiet down. Shut up, video. There's so many videos coming out of crazy street battles in Tbilisi. It's really heating up, and we're seeing the hockey helmets and the plywood garbage can shields again, and it's kind of deja vu. So obviously Victoria Newland's out there handing out the coup cookies, Robin, again. She's
Yeah,
got them
exactly.
special coup cookies. She has a family recipe from the Rothschilds or some shit. Sorry,
Yeah, yeah.
I can't. But anyways,
It's
you
the
just have to put in the
Jews.
subtle
It's
bit of
the Jews behind it.
anti-Semitism in
Yes,
there, right?
exactly. Thank you.
Just to make it uh accurate. So yeah, it's going again. And I saw a really interesting post that I wanted to discuss with you guys, and I didn't know how to take it because someone was reposting um this, I don't remember his name, Ivanatsky. He's a Canadian Russo phallic academic who posts on Twitter, and him saying, comparing it to the Maidan in a negative light in terms of Newland and her cookies and all of that bull, and then a supposed Georgia academic who said that was saying that they didn't want comparisons to Maidan because of the bad connotations, but so of it in some of Georgian society, but like, so it was I don't know. I wanted to discuss that, but it seemed to me in my bubble that it was just sort of like, don't compare it to Maidan because no, just don't do it. We don't want Maidan 2.0 in Georgia. So just shut up. Be quiet. What do you
Yeah,
think
that.
about that, Robin?
Yeah, no, that sounds. I don't know Georgians that well. I don't know the situation there, but what little I've heard, I don't remember ever seeing a Georgian having any negative reaction to Maidan at all. If anything, there was admiration. And, as we know, the Georgian Legion, who had some problems lately, but still there are many brave Georgians who came to Ukraine to fight against the Russians in Ukraine. So there's a strong connection between Ukraine and Georgia. Yeah, it sounds like the usual nonsense to me. Uh, yeah, I mean, I think any revolution that is compared to the Maidan, they should be happy for the comparison. The Maidan has really, I mean, Ukraine is not perfect yet, but boy, the changes that happened in almost overnight, that wonderful changes for the better. And I hope Georgia has its chance. I hope Russia is weakened at this point. It may be weakened enough that they're able to wrest themselves free from Russian influence. Also, I certainly hope so. It would be a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. Um, don't you love the guy with the fireworks gun? Did you see that guy?
You mean walking down the street with a?
Well,
Is it,
no. Well, I mean, there's lots of guys with fireworks
yeah.
guns, but they're just using fireworks. And I've just seen another video. I'll post it in the nest, but it's just basically it's from our friend Marika, who I believe is speaking on the space soon. If I saw Marika Mikashvili, no, maybe not. I thought I saw
No, I
something
think
about
I think she's been on before. I've lost track of it. I'm sure she'll be on soon, just with the way things are going.
but her tweet. I just threw it in the nest, guys. Battle of Hogwarts between good and evil in real life, and yeah, because all the fireworks are making it very splashy. Lots of lots of um, spells flying around, I guess, from firework wands of freedom. Robin, God, James, I'm so glad you're here. Hello.
Well, hey,
Hey,
Adam, that is
what
a
am I? Chopped liver? Jeez.
chopped
No,
liver.
I was just he just put up his hand at the exact moment when I was just losing my train of thought, looking at
It's
Willabuster's profile picture, being like, "I'm failing you, Willabuster. I'm failing you."
no, well, chopped liver. I mean, Robin. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Anyway, no, what a tool that is for protests. I'd never seen anything like it. I was watching it the first time, and I'm like looking at it, saying, "What is it exactly that is?" I can't really tell, and And then I thought he's going to run out of ammunition soon. And then he didn't. So now I want the directions on how to build one of those. So if you run across it, Adam, and I figure you might, then please do share with me at least. Thank you. No, it was really that would piss me off if somebody hit me with that shit. So they're
It did
pissing off
piss
the
me off when
police.
someone hit me with that shit.
Oh, did it? Did they? Uh-oh.
I
There's
didn't even
there's
have a
clearly a
riot
story
shield
there.
and a
Oh
big
my
old
God.
helmet. No,
What?
just a wedding mishap with
Oh
some
dear.
drunken groomsmen.
You know, it's interesting that the Georgians are a little the Georgian bad guys in the legislature are a little behind the times. They haven't passed dictatorial laws yet. There's still people wearing helmets and with shields. Like, we can't have that.
Maybe they should try that, Robin, and see how it goes for them, because it went so good for Yanukovych.
Yes, that's a good idea. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, Robin. Hello, Adam. So I just wanted to mention another video, and if you follow Marika's profile and have a look, you will see it there, and that is of people dancing in the water cannons, which I think is just absolutely wonderful. Dancing and singing and really showing those police officers just how good their water cannons are. Oh, well, you can call them police, can't you? Security forces, or whatever you want to call them. And that kid, I don't know if you've seen that kid being interviewed on that video. He's so passionate. It's absolutely incredible. And I'm really excited by all this. It's kind of really odd, isn't it, to say that I'm excited that the world is in such chaos. But unfortunately, the evil that we're all fighting, this is the way that it has to be. And I was speaking to Karina at length, actually, earlier about it. And she thinks it's absolutely fantastic and so wonderful. And she was saying the same thing. Well, this is what has to happen around the world for us all to fight this evil. And I think we just have to never forget as well that none of us would be here where we are if it wasn't for Ukrainians and the sacrifices that they are making, and the incredible sacrifices that they have made to weaken Russia, and therefore weaken Russia's influence around the world as well.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. That's exactly right. You know, and I think that's something we have to continue to articulate, that Ukraine is not fighting a war about Ukraine. Ukraine is fighting a war for all of us. And you know, it's this is a as Wardogo was on earlier with Gurza from SBU Alpha, as you know, Tracy, because you were there too. And you know, he was saying that Maidan in 2014 was a civilizational choice, a choice to go with democracy, with Western, you know, values, with rule of law, with dignity the individual, with community, and that's what's happening in Georgia now. It's a civilizational choice, and that civilizational choice is one that we in the West made a long time ago. But in order for us to be able to continue to make that choice freely, we need to be able to stop Russia, who is trying to take that away from all of us, not just Ukraine. So it's a very important thing to remember and to remind people. You know, I don't care if people don't want to hear me say it. I'm going to keep on saying it because it's very true. Our support for Ukraine is support for the entire free world. James, over to you.
And I just want to remind that at the outset of the Kursk invasion by Ukraine, they were asking for other countries to consider, revolting against Russia, to take up arms against Russia. That it would be, this would be the ideal time to do so. Now, they're a little bit of ways away from that. I know the president sort of has the military and is looking to do all the things correctly, and getting a new vote in place would be the correct thing to do. And, they are holding out on joining the assembly. So there's no quorum, no laws can be passed. They're in this place now where things are kind of stuck. But I am just reminded that, again, that this is something that Ukraine was suggesting. And so I don't want them to, get into an awful bloody war at the same time, how do you get away from Russia at this point? So it just invites my mind to think about that they may have to stand up a little bit more and do more than they're doing now. And it seems like they're willing to do it and they're on their path to that. And I don't know how they avoid a wider conflict at this point, but probably other people know. I'm just looking at um, what I think are going to be escalatory steps. And now we're talking about water cannons and beatings at this point. So, but it could get a lot worse. We know that. So, anyways, I'm just anxious what other people think about. You know, could that go to war for Georgia?
Well, I think they're on the right trajectory of standing up. I think they're in a good spot because in 2014 there was nobody else. But what we're seeing is like they've been waging hybrid war on us for a long time, and what we're seeing now is a hybrid war on multiple fronts being waged on them. So maybe, hopefully, I pray that the Georgians will not have as heavy a lift. I hope that they don't have to have their own heavenly 100 martyrs for their cause because of um, FSB agents and are distracted by Georgia and what's going on in Syria and what's going on in Kursk. And I think what this all adds up to, I hope, is a way harder path for Volya to drive Ukraine out of the Kursk region before Mango Mussolini takes office. Go ahead, Arya.
Sorry, I think Will and Lexicon had their hands up though before me. I'm not sure if you can see all the hands.
Their hands were up and then disappeared.
No, I still see them up. Elmo is at it. Yeah. Let's if you can hang out a little bit, Aria. Let's go to Will and Lexicon and then go back to Aria. Thank you. Will.
Yeah, I mean, I agree in principle with all of that, but the sobering reality is here again we're seeing a position where failure to fully arm Ukraine so that they can't take the initiative now may end up causing all this thing for Russia to be able to react effectively. Russia's empire is being held together as with as much balancing as they possibly can. And Georgia, Syria, everything going off all at once is exactly what is required because it shows that the whole thing's crumbling at the same time. But when I was speaking to my Russian friend last night and talking to him about all of it happening at the same time, and maybe this is Georgia's opportunity to not have to go through, the color and then the other Maidan, and he said Russia will never let Georgia go. Russia will insert the military directly into Georgia again if it looks like it's going bad there. And the only way to prevent that would be to Russia not have enough military. So, it's everywhere all at once has to happen right now. You've got to hope that the violence gets much more dramatic and stays at a pace in Syria. We've got to hope somehow Ukraine can come up with a capability to put even more pressure on Russia, even though they don't have any of the equipment that they need to be able to do that in order for Georgia to break free. These are all symbiotic. If Russia is broken anywhere, they will break everywhere. But I'm not sure we've equipped the Ukrainian area to be able to do that. And it's very unfortunate because had we've been listened to for the last, I don't know how long have I been talking about boring shit like armored fighting vehicles coming out of the desert in America? If they had done that, or Poland had transferred 250 Bradleys to Ukraine, and that we were busy backfilling those from America out of storage. They need some punch right now, and they just don't have it to be able to put the extra pressure on in Ukraine. and all we can do is hope. But fuck, I hate relying on hope. It's like being religious. I despise having to hope without being able to do something when I can actually do something, rather than wait around for some deity to save me. It's phenomenally frustrating. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping things stay that the Georgia Dream weakens and breaks before Russia can get itself organized. But I do believe my friend's probably right that Russia will send in the troops if necessary if Georgia Dream gets weakened enough. And the only hope that they won't have enough is if Syria is bad enough and Ukraine is bad enough at the time. It'd be nice if we could get something to kick off in Transnistria. I mean, everywhere all at once. Everywhere Russia's got their fingers, they need to be smashed with a hammer right now.
Yeah, that is the hope that that in Transnistria and other places that people see that Russia is sufficiently weakened. What is the what kind of military does Georgia have? I mean, I know they certainly have very brave fighters, but do they have any of what they would need to fight off the Russians? The Russians were never going to let Ukraine go either, and they invaded, and we see what's happened there. So I haven't, I do believe in a deity, and I do have hope, but I'm wondering how well equipped the Georgians are at this point.
Not that great, and they would have to be. You'd have to turn the entire Georgian military to the cause of independence.
I heard that there are some Georgian units in Ukraine that are waiting to see if they're going to be called back to. Yeah, it's a very fluid situation. Then I guess we're just going to have to hang in there. I see that someone just posted in the back channel that I'd seen this a little bit earlier that they're starting with the Molotov cocktails now. So the question is, this is Timothy Milovanov, I guess is that how it's pronounced, that he's saying, that in his experience in Ukraine, the government will escalate from rubber bullets to live rounds. And at this point, then this is really what pushed Ukrainians over the edge. So it's going to be interesting to see. I just hope that they're able to pull this off. Lexicon, over to you.
Well, yeah, these are the very thoughts, worries that we've been having. I don't know how memorable all my comments have been over the months, but from the times this started when they were protesting against the Russian law, as they called it, I've always been asking Marika and others that were on our spaces about this question. And we've been watching. What's her Salome Zurabishvili, whatever. She's spoken at for the last 3 years at the Munich conference, talking about the issue of how strategically um, Munich security conference that I think occurs in February each year. How strategic the position of Georgia is on the Black Sea. She spoke in that way to rally support, create awareness, and rally support among allies, friends who attend that conference. She talked about how important it is for the Western allies to have a Black Sea policy. And anyway, talk very strategically. Now, what I've liked about the way, as I said, Marika talks to us about how their analysis, where it is at the moment, and it's evolved. I think that during the protests against the Russian law, they they hoped in a kind of, in a forthright way and sort of innocent way that the awareness of this law would rally more of the population. They hoped that the elections could be run fairly, and they were really dismayed to see the way the government so easily stole it from them, and how hard it is to rally the population. And I've listened to them, their analysis develop as they talk about how this is like a series of blows against the population and how the population has become more and more aware. But she knows that it's not just simply spontaneous outrage, but the analysis of people that are showing some kind of leadership while they take care to try not to get to promote or elevate individual leaders who could be then targeted by the government. They're trying to shield their leadership from that. But the leadership of analysis and strategic paths for the population has been really important. Now, one of the things she's been telling us over the period is that, or especially quite recently, she said at first that their government was not resorting to firing even rubber bullets. And we know, of course, she's also talked about how the army will not help assist the government to put down this, or the army seems to be unwilling to be used. Now, what I've been expressing all this time is exactly this fear that, of course, that Russia cannot afford to let Georgia go precisely because of the Ukraine troubles and throughout Crimea and the land bridge. And there, where did they take the ships? They took them to Georgia, to, is it that province called, it's the Abkhazia one, right? That's on the Black Sea. And which and there's even a little unrest going on there. The whoever the tolerated chairperson, head of that Abkhazia, has been expressing some objections to Russian, I think it's property owners, wrecking the place. And I can imagine the dredging of the port they're trying to build is not helping either. So, but I think that at the same time, what the Georgian protesters have been recognizing is exactly as we were saying, that Russia's very stretched. In Syria, hear a lot of people. I've been on a couple of spaces trying to hear what people are saying, and there's a lot of view that Russia is seeing that Assad is doomed, and they're going to kind of shuck him. They'll let him go. They think he's a dead end, but I mean, they don't want to let go of that port. That's what they're there for. Turas, is it called? And that, that's of strategic importance. It's their whole ability, their projection of power on the other side of the Bosporus, throughout to the Mediterranean, the Mideast, and so on. So it's really vital. So letting Syria go is it's different from letting Assad go. Anyway, I agree with people that Georgia is really of strategic interest to Russia. And at the same time, I hear what the Georgians are saying, that maybe they're able to catch Putin at a difficult time for him. Perfect storm, as you say. And yep, it's really tough sitting here just hoping and not being able to do much. I do take comfort, though, in the idea that we heard from some Georgians early on in Ukraine's current resistance war that they were coming to Ukraine to gain and develop their experience. So that's a really interesting thought. And I'm sure they've developed a lot. Anyway, back to you guys. I know Arya's coming up too.
Yeah, thank you, Lexicon. Aria, let's go ahead. We'll go next.
Thank you, Robin, Adam, and everybody else here for having this space. Um, two different thoughts. One on in regards to what was just said as far as Syria, and one as far as Georgia. In regards to Syria, right, there is a chance that the Russians and the Iranians abandon Assad. I don't think the Russians will do that short of total collapse and him getting captured or something like that. They're too invested. There's thousands of troops already in the country. There's been no indication of movements to get them out or the fraying of alliances. And then there's the simple fact that Assad and Syria are direct puppets of Russia, right? If Russia abandons them, they lose all international standing. And all these little countries that have been pivoting towards Russia and Africa, in South America, in other places of the world, are going to lose all faith. So the Russians, I do not see them as being willing to abandon him. Right. That being said, whether or not the Syrian army and whatever the Russians and Iranians can fly in and get him, right, may not be enough to stop the push, especially if the videos coming out of the rebels in the north, they're restocking from the Turks is correct. right? The videos of the tanks, the armored personnel carriers, heavy artillery, advanced drones in large numbers, right? So Putin may not be able to save Assad, but I don't see him running away. He has a lot to lose and a lot less to lose if there's a couple hundred to a couple thousand Russian troops who die in the process. He still does have the strength to do that, although it is going to tax him and it may affect the Georgia situation. Um, going to Georgia for a second, I don't see their prospects as being good, right? The way I see it, and this is only based on a limited knowledge of Georgia and my knowledge of the previous war between them and Russia when Russia invaded. I don't see them as being able to stop it, right? You have one of two options as far as the government goes there: heavy crackdown and the people disperse, or heavy crackdown and you get a Maidan, actual civil war type scenario in which the Russians are coming in. And the only way, as Will said, is if the entire Georgian army is willing to fight the Russians, and then the Georgian people mobilize en masse to support, and the West gets their act together and supports them. I otherwise don't see it happening. And they need to be ready for a situation like Chechnya if that is the road they are going to go down. And from what I have seen of the protest, while there are the videos of the guys with the Molotovs and there is the Harry Potter fireworks guy, right? The majority of the protesters are women and average looking people. They're not people dressed up ready to fight. They're not holding clubs. They're not holding Molotovs. Now that can change, but I don't see necessarily a good resolution here unless the West takes real concrete action after this escalates further than it is, assuming the Russians and the Russian supporters aren't able to stamp it out before it gets to that point. So I hope I'm wrong there, but I don't see a very good prospect. Right, they're surrounded with the exception of Azerbaijan, and now there might be some way diplomatically, right, where they could reach some agreement with Turkey, but I don't see that as happening either. And then from the south, you have to remember Armenia is an ally of Russia, and Armenia has sent troops to fight with Assad in Syria. It's possible Putin convinces the Armenians to get involved, promises them small strips of land that they have historically wanted from Georgia, even though it's not the type of issue that they saber rattle over, right? So we need to watch the situation very carefully, but this could very easily get very bloody very quickly, where we see several hundred or several thousand Georgians, God forbid, die, and it become a complete total Russian puppet. I don't have high hopes. And again, this is one of those things I really do pray I'm wrong. Back to you, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Ariel. I just a couple of things that I would like to point out. The early days of the Maidan, it was very much regular people, students, grandparents and grandparents. It was as Wynnyckyj talks about in the early days. It was more like some kind of like a party rather than a serious demonstration. Now that's not what's going on in Georgia here, but one of the things to remember, and I agree, it's the chances are probably not that good, but at the same time, all of those people who might help Russia, people if they see, people love a winner and they want to be on the winning side. If Russia appears to be mortally wounded, I think a lot of what's left of their allies are going to find other things to do with themselves. So I think that's going to be part of the issue. For example, Armenia. If Russia doesn't appear to have its act together enough to really be able to manage, then any assurances that they're going to give Armenia land or whatever are not going to be taken very seriously, because there'll be the question of, or do we want to be on the wrong side of this? And if Russia goes down and we've supported them, what are we going to get out of it? So, that's a possibility. Anyway, okay, I see a lot of hands. We've got Lexicon, Will, and Zio. Go ahead, Lexicon.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued with what all of these cracks in Russia's veneer are going to say to the American government. I mean, Trump's got a lot of friends there, MAGA friends, who really don't see any problem with Russia. Why? Russia's not fighting us. Why should we? They don't hate me. Why should I hate them? And it must be a little odd for them to those who might look at anything. Well, he's got some advisors who look around. So here is Ukraine fighting tooth and nail and has been continuing to. And here's Georgia fighting them. And here's Syria that's just saying out, I want to kick you guys out. And Moldova that's trying to fight them off. And and various other things going on. So I really wonder how this is going to affect the move towards so-called forced negotiations in Ukraine. I also am interested in how successful Ukraine has been just in the last few days. My good friend there, I like a lot, reporting from Ukraine, talks about the number of ATACMS strikes that have now gone from, moving from Kursk into the various collected, the command posts and sites of munitions and logistical points. There were attacks on about, was it 5 or 6 points in the last, in the few day before yesterday, and I think it was a couple of nights in a row. An amazing number of capabilities knocked out. So it is astonishing how America finally takes a few breaks off, not even all of them. And I was saying the other day, don't you just think that Ukraine's got lined up a whole lot of firing solutions, a whole lot of targets lined up for the moment they're able to? I am quite impressed with the operational successes that Ukraine's had just since the time that that a few of the restrictions have come off. So I'm interested in also in, like, as for Georgia, I agree with you. I'm really sometimes dismayed by the people's analysis that they may be able to pull off a soft one, but they know the place better than we do. And I don't think they're so naive as I see some commentators, some tweeters have been implying. So anyway, I'm with you, and my heart's in my mouth as well. But it's a tough one. But back to you all.
Thanks, Lexicon. Will.
So other things that can be done and probably to watch, the I would say, is the most surprising thing that's happened to me over the last couple of days has been Turkey's injection of into the Syrian situation, and clearly taking a side, and the other is Turkey saying, at the same time, any any agreement for peace in Ukraine that included territorial concessions by Ukraine would be unacceptable to Turkey. So, I mean, that's an incredibly bold statement, and the timing of that statement, specifically because Erdogan is so opportunistic, I think is indicative that while I think it is, I would not be making a bet that Georgia situation uh, uh, isn't. Well, I hope that that Georgia carries on and can get Georgia Dream removed and have new elections at a minimum, that sort of thing. But uh, I'm not hopeful about it because of what Ari said. The Russian military is so much stronger, even inside Georgia, well, on close to Georgia, that I don't think the Georgian army could take them on effectively, more effectively maybe than last time, maybe because if they all got together. But the thing is, everything has to happen in a concerted manner, and like somebody said, if the West could get their act together, well, if the West could get their act together, we wouldn't have a war in Ukraine anymore. But the um, there are some hopeful signs, and there are some hopeful signs by watching the opportunists in particular. Turkey knows Russia as well as anyone, and he clearly knows, Erdogan knows how weakened they are, because he wouldn't be taking these positions that he is unless he knew. He's a master at picking the winning side and jumping on board just before it gets away. So I think I'm still I still think there's a chance here that Georgia can succeed here, but it would be so much easier if there was a lot more pressure to put on everywhere, particularly in Ukraine, because Putin is so obsessed with Ukraine. If they had the capability to draw more of his forces onto them right now, uh, they would provide the opportunity, along with what's going on in Syria. If the United States and other countries could get involved, not to try to pick winners in Syria, but to try to keep the pressure on in Syria. I kind of agree with Thomas Tyner. Now would be a really good time for the United States and everybody else who is in the area to start bombing Assad's forces. Start bombing Assad's capabilities and his air, degrading his air defense, doing all that sort of stuff, because he's a bad guy. And I don't know about the who's going to win down there, but I just want him to lose, because if he starts losing more, it puts more pressure on Russia. It's a big problem, and I really would like to see something happen in Transnistria and happen all through Central Africa. Any of the countries that would have the capability to kick people out, or just make diplomatic announcements that put lots of pressure on it. The United States coming out and saying they were going to stop engagement with Georgia right away, quickly, not waiting 3-4 weeks, like with North Korean troops showing up and then finally deciding to do stuff. We need definitive statements from all governments all at once. And I'll say again that if the United States and or Europe were to commit to a large amount of infantry fighting vehicles, tanks, and other equipment right now, if they boldly made the commitment to step up with $100 billion per year on budget as necessary, they wouldn't have to spend the money, but the commitment is the sort of thing that would also put a credible amount of diplomatic pressure on Russia. And they're going to have to decide. Make them decide. Do what war is. Make your enemy face a series of bad choices that they have to make.
Yeah, that works for me. I hope we see Russia having to face those choices in the very near future. Zio and then James.
Hey, I wanted to respond to some stuff that Arya brought up. I know that Armenia has some forces in Syria, and we saw them pull out of Aleppo on video. But just wanted to mention that, you know, they just had that conflict with Azerbaijan that they lost, and Russian peacekeepers, which were supposed to prevent, all of these border conflicts that Russia set up by drawing these terrible borders. These peacekeepers kind of failed in their mission, right? So that's kind of like one erosion of Russian power in the region. But the reason that that's important is that, you know, Azerbaijan has pitched pipelines from Azerbaijan through Turkey into the EU, and they have the capacity to replace Russian uh, oil exports to Europe through cooperation with Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan. A bunch of the other stands are integrated to Azerbaijan's kind of oil pipelines, but these are not yet hooked up to the EU. So we know that Erdogan is a very sneaky opportunist, right? And he was trying to get Russia to abdicate all, rights to any fuel that's transiting through Turkish pipes, and they were trying to get a 25% discount on all of the fuel that they would purchase from Russia in exchange for like additional Turk streams pipes going online. And, so there are opportunities to displace Russian power and influence in the region. And I have a sense that Armenia is still very concerned about, their conflict with Azerbaijan. I don't see them sort of participating in a sort of like a Georgian uh, kind of situation outside of like maybe a small token expeditionary force. But there's always room for surprises. So just wanted to mention that, Armenia still has to look over their shoulder if they're making a large military commitment to try to, I don't know, quell the Georgian protests. I think they still have a lot of things to worry about in their own backyard.
Yeah, I think that certainly is true. Let's go to James then, Arya.
Well, you know more about this stuff than I do in that area. I'm concerned about Georgia, and their prospects in a war are not good right now. But what we saw was that determined defense of Ukraine led into changing from kind of asymmetric warfare. We got a little bit more standing up toward having dominance warfare from Ukraine. Not yet exactly, but it's getting there. And so, is there any chance, any hope that the West can send some of the things that they would need to fight like Ukraine through Turkey? Is this a possibility? And what's Turkey's interest in aiding Georgia as well? I just don't know these things that well.
Yeah, does anyone have that is a very interesting question. Turkey is really a dark horse. I mean, I don't know. That's a very interesting question. I think we're going to be doing a quick deep dive into everything Georgia in the next few days here because they've suddenly become the center of a lot. It's another country that probably deserves a lot more attention than we've been giving it. Anyway, over to you, Arya.
So in regards first to what Zizo said, I agree. I don't see the Armenians sending in full military units. It was more the Russians using their territory to launch a second front against Georgia, right? And then Georgia's on three different sides dealing with the Russians, right? They can very easily sweep the country with a small force compared to what they sent into Ukraine. Especially if the military hasn't activated to fight in the same way they activated last time. In regards to whether or not they would be willing to do so, especially when they have the issues with Azerbaijan as it stands and the fears there, I don't know, right? One of their biggest issues with the Russians have been that the Russians have not given them the type of security that they had promised. And if the Russians agree to some sort of formal military alliance where they would come to Armenia's aid if Azerbaijan comes in again, then I could see the Armenians jumping at that in a second. Now, whether or not the Russians are going to risk that for the sake of getting a country that's already in their sphere to be a direct puppet, I don't think so. Right. As far as Turkey and Erdogan, right? And supporting Georgia and getting UN weapons through, it's quite possible. If you had asked me 3 months ago, I would have said it was highly unlikely, considering the amount of money, munitions, and equipment he has towards northern Syria at this point, and now is in direct confrontation with Russia. I see the chances of that actually being highly likely, right? If there is collective support in the West to pressure him to do so and give him the green light to do so. How that will end up resolving, I don't know. Right. I will say I trust Erdogan as much as that horse was able to throw him off his back. Right. So I don't put much faith there. But I do see there being possibilities for cooperation with Turkey against Russia, with Georgia, assuming the protesters are successful in a very short period of time and are able to get a working government and at least the majority of the military supporting them, right? And are able to directly call for assistance before Russia sends in all the little green men and stamps them out. So that's my thoughts there. But I would look to Turkey, and Turkey just went from being non-active in the Ukraine conflict and in what is going on there to being very active. Right, we are going to see a lot more little tokens of support from Turkey. How long it will last, I have no idea. It could turn off in a second. But in the meantime, I'm very happy for that, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point in the near future you see some Turkish weapons showing up in Ukraine or something along those lines. But there is a good chance that they can get involved in Georgia, assuming the West is willing to back them. And I have no idea what the politicians talking or thinking or acting on this, right? Whether they're terrified of some genocide going on in Georgia and it turning into a second Chechnya, or they're afraid of further Russian destabilization or some other excuse that they have given till now as to why they don't support Ukraine more. Back to you, Robin and Adam.
Yep. Thank you, Aria. Yeah, it's well, as I keep on saying, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. There are an awful lot of pieces, in the air at this point. I mean, we don't have any idea what the incoming Trump administration is, how they're going to view this at all. I don't think there have been any statements on that, and even with statements, we can't always be sure. So it's going to be, it's going to be an interesting few weeks. I just hope that Georgia is able to. I really hope that they're able to succeed in this. It would be a wonderful thing for the Georgian people, and it would be a great demonstration to the world that Russian power can be resisted, which is a great way to start an avalanche in that direction. By the way, I keep on forgetting to say this, but if I imagine some of you guys have already tweeted, liked and retweeted this space. So I see we're filling up, but if you haven't, if you just take a sec to retweet and let people know we're here, because we aren't on all the time these days. It sometimes takes a while for people to be aware that we're here. So anyway, what did I want to say? Oh, up in the nest, since we don't have any hands at the moment, up in the nest is a post for a fundraiser that War Doggo is running along with Sunflower Seeds Ukraine, a nice, a small new American charity, 501c3. We had Gurza on earlier. Tracy and I spoke to him. He's the commander of SBU Alpha, and it was really fascinating. He's been in SBU since 2013, so that this predates the Revolution of Dignity. He talked to us about his commander, who turned out to be working for the Russians, and had the difficulties they had at the time with figuring out who was loyal and who was a plant and who was secretly working for the Russians. A fascinating discussion. This is one of the best units in the Ukrainian military. It's elite special operators. They definitely punch way above their weight, and what they've asked for is something simple, something I think probably we have warehouses for our special operators in the United States. You probably get all of this and some backups, before you go out on a mission. These guys do not have the optics that they need, especially optics that allow them to see the enemy in the dark, for example. And these optics are life saving, and also they really increase their effectiveness when they can spot the enemy from farther away. They have a much better chance of protecting themselves and taking them out if they need to. So anyway, we did raise a little bit today, and I thank everyone who we got some very nice notes. One of the nice things about this website, where the link, first tweet after the main tweet in our post has the information about how to get to the website. You can go on there and you'll see everybody who's donated and how much. If you don't want to put your name or the amount, you are free to be anonymous. Many people do, and some really wonderful messages of support, which are getting to the guys in SBU Alpha. We read some of them out today, and they're told about them, and it really makes a difference. It makes them realize that there are people all over the world who are still pulling for them, who are taking time out of their day to donate a little or a lot and to send messages of encouragement. So, if you like check under your seat cushions and check the jacket from last year, see if you can find a tenner in there and see what you can do. Thank you very much. Anyway, back to the discussion. Zio.
Hey, sorry, I just got back home from the Thanksgiving break, so I just have to say hello to my little doggy back home. Anyway, so I think there's also an interesting dynamic with Turkey where I don't see them just playing the winning side. I see them playing both sides kind of systematically. I think you see this with their sale of Bayraktar drones to Ukraine. People like to say, "Oh, but they didn't do that, when the war was hot or whatever." But at that point, Russia had already invaded Crimea, right? And they were changing the uh, territorial borders in the Black Sea, right? And that is very dangerous to Turkey. Russia has historically been very interested in trying to control the Bosphorus Strait. They fought multiple wars with Turkey over this issue. So I think Erdogan understands kind of that strategic calculus where a strong Russia in the Black Sea is extremely detrimental to Turkish power in the region. And I think ultimately that calculus is what drove him to make that sale of Bayraktars, right? And yeah, just wanted to emphasize that there are ways in which Turkey is finding to support Ukraine. I would like to see some of those increase, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I think likely Erdogan is looking for the opportunities not to stymie Russian power, but actually to maximize Turkish power and influence. I think he is very much a self-interested actor, and he doesn't necessarily uh, concern himself as much with the overall strength of other players. I think he's mostly trying to maximize his own gains in the region. I think that's what I see. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry, I was 5 screens away. Couldn't get back. Yes, that's an absolutely very good point. I think Turkey has, has a history of watching out for themselves, and if it's in Turkey's interest, they will help out. So we'll have to see. All right, Adam. I don't know who was first. You, James, Aria, one of you want to fess up who was first, and then we have to get book club started in a few minutes. But let's finish
Go
up
ahead.
this discussion
I'll
first.
pass. Good points, Sia. Thanks.
I want to hear what you had to say, James. Just really quickly, I agree with everything you said, Theo. I think that that's a very good analysis of Turkey, and I completely agree, and I hope people take that to heart. It was important to say. Back to you.
I just wanted to ask really quickly. I saw some reports that Turkey had used their S-400 to support some of the Syrian rebels. Is that been confirmed? Does anybody know?
So there were pictures which claim to be S-400s in northern Syria with the Syrian rebels. Now, I have no idea if those pictures have been verified yet, or if the actual shooting down of the planes with those weapons has been verified. But there is a significant amount of people in the OPSEC community who appear to believe so. Whether or not that's true, I don't know.
Okay, thanks, Aria. Adam, live mic. If you want to comment, that's all
Oh,
right.
geez. First I couldn't hear Arya, and then I could hear him again. So I thought I had my mic on. True story.
Yes, it's been fun here lately with all the technical difficulties, but we soldier on one way or the other. At least Gorza stayed up today. Last week when he was on, I think he spent 95% of the time bouncing back and forth to, out and back into listener, back into it was terrible, but we had a good conversation this time. Anyway, Adam, I see we're to the end of. James, did you have anything you wanted to add before we switch over to book club?
An extended, monograph on all things about Turkey, but no, not really. There's such good comments. This isn't the time to get into more of that. It just keeps going, But Turkey is a great focus for some discussions.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will be in the next few weeks. Okay, we're going to switch over to book club now. Just before we start, I want to mention I didn't have a chance to look at it yet because I got the announcement right before we started. But our friend G-Man, who I don't see here now, G-Man is often here for book club, although it's 2 o'clock in the morning where he is. But he has a Substack page. He posts a lot of really interesting and insightful articles and different things. The latest one he's put up is on the Maidan. As I said, I haven't read it yet, but knowing G-Man, I'm sure it's worth a look. So if you know him, if you are on Substack, if you don't know him, look for him on Substack. He's definitely worth looking for, along with Beefeater, who's mostly over there now. Not Beefeater has had it with Twitter at this point. So if you want to catch his very insightful and voluminous posts on all sorts of different things having to do with Ukraine. Substack or Blue Sky, I think, also is where to find it. Anyway, with that, Adam, it's book club time. We are reading exactly. Yeah, we were. Aria was mentioning earlier, and it's really true. We really need to have some intros and things. We have to think about that. I do.
I'm going to make it exciting.
Oh, good.
I'm going to do a matching donation for SBU Alpha Wardago and sunflowers. That's at the top of our nest for 250 American dollars, which, as you know, is 797,000 Canadian dollars and 340 trillion rubles. So don't laugh at me. We're all poorer than you guys. I'm just joking. So anything you donate until the end of book club will be doubled by me. And so get to it.
That's great. That's great, Adam. I really appreciate it. It's been it's taken a while, but we are getting some donations in now. And folks, this is the time to do it. When we have these matches, you get it's double your money. And take Adam's. Poor Adam is going to have to go to the bank and get some real dollars out to pay for this.
I'm going to have to warm up the dog team and get them out of my igloo and cross the northern wastes to Royal Bank of Canada, 3 towns over. Right, Lexicon?
Oh, dear. Yes.
She's like, that's what I pictured Alberta as anyways, here from Montreal.
Well, my friend Emil says it's, or do you say this too? It's the Texas of Canada. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know who said it first, but I definitely feel it every day.
Yeah. Yeehaw. Well, anyway, okay, seriously now, folks. We are almost done. I can't believe it, with Mychailo Wynnyckyj's Ukraine's Maidan, Russia's War, a Chronicle and Analysis of the Revolution of Dignity. Boy, I've learned a lot in this book, I must say. We're another book down. We're hoping next week I'll make an actual announcement. We're hoping in January to start on Russia and Ukraine by Popova and Chevelle. Russia and Ukraine: Entangled Histories, Diverging States. After we finish Wynnyckyj, though, we're going to take a couple of weeks to take a little trip through an absolutely charming book called The Ukrainian Christmas by our friend Yaroslav Hrytsak. It's a charming little book. It's all about warm and fuzzy, wonderful Ukrainian culture and the extremely rich Christmas tradition. I'm hoping we're going to bring some honest to God Ukrainians in. We've got one here now, but we're going to get a few more, and talk about Ukrainian Christmas traditions. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to share food over Twitter. We haven't figured out how to do that yet, but anyway. So I'm looking forward to that. A little excursus into why this beautiful Ukrainian culture so deserves to be preserved. Anyway, but that will be in a few weeks. Right now, we are in chapter 10, called A Postmodern Revolution. And I had just made an aside at the beginning of this about Wynnyckyj's doubling down on sociologist jargon. And I guess Adam, I think, had a comment on that.
Yes, quite. The dogmatic approach of the author's prevailing doctrine of an unnecessarily nomenclatural, phrase-based rhetorical paradigm that transcends the ideational shift of materialist polities. Did that sound like it meant something? I tried to make it mean something.
Yeah, well, it sounded like, this chapter was, it's interesting, but I found it very frustrating. It made me really wish for good old Yaroslav Hrytsak and the old, our old historians and Timothy Snyder even. This is where there is a certain jargon with sociologists that just makes me want to tear my hair out. But anyway, hopefully I managed to figure out what the heck he was talking about enough to make it clear. Yeah, it's sort of interesting when I think about it, the Zelensky effect. Weren't they sociologists? Because they didn't do that. It was really quite clear. But anyway, I guess Wynnyckyj managed to contain himself through 9 chapters. In chapter 10, he just had to let it all hang out, let it all out before the end of the book.
Just sociology tattooed on his forehead backwards, running through the lecture hall.
8666, right? Okay, anyway. All right, seriously, folks. Okay, so a postmodern revolution, he calls this, and we talk about what postmodernism means. Um, the revolution of dignity he calls an inflection point, that it had ideational foundations of social system. The social system had transformed quite rapidly, meaning that there were new ideas that caused social changes. But while people were accepting these new concepts and were quite committed to them in some cases, the institutions of the state and even of society, they change much more slowly. I mean, this is obvious. There's still the same people working there who need to be brought on board, and the elites. At some point, the people who are sort of nominally running everything uh, can be replaced, but you certainly never replace the entire workforce or the lower echelons of people who are already set in their ways and are committed to the system that is being replaced. So anyway, that is the situation. It's still the same situation in Ukraine, really. There's still some conflict between the old Soviet ways of doing things and the post Maidan ideology that which we will talk about more in this chapter. Um, so he in this chapter he discusses two concepts particularly. One is the concept we've heard a lot about already, the concept of dignity, um, and, uh, and as a core value. And this was these are these many of these ideas are very new, quite leading edge out there. Um, in the revolution of dignity, then we see a shift from what he calls modernist to postmodernist, from uh, the importance of the individual and individual rights and things like that. That was a very important step to go through, and that was what a lot of the Enlightenment and the American and French revolutions were about. But what he calls personalism, which is the individual as valuable, but in his relation to other people in community rather than a discrete individual. I shouldn't say discrete, but rather than solely a unique individual. That the connection with other people in a community becomes an important thing. Also, this may very well have an impact on the future development of Europe generally. This is something new. Um, and I see Lexicon's hand. Did I already make a mistake there?
Come on, you're not making mistakes. No, I think, I appreciate what he does to, show us some of in the earlier chapter when he talked about cleavages and how those have evolved. And, I know he wants to say he's saying that something radically changed in Ukraine. I don't think his argument for it being a new kind of revolution really holds water. But, but the thing anyway, I do appreciate how he helps us understand some of the momentous changes and demands for a new way. Now, at the same time, um, when he helped us in the chapter before see how thoroughgoing was the existence of these oligarchs control or their ability to milk the fruits of their hold on really important nexuses of the economy. I think that he doesn't do us a service if he implies, I'm not sure he does, that that's all gone. I mean, it's really not all gone. And it is pretty intriguing. He is explaining, as once again, Adam will agree with me, servant of the people really shows the persistence of these guys. And man, their presence throughout the economy and their anyway, I don't think that those classes have disappeared. I wish he had stuck to a little more classical explanation that what's happening is the economy was dominated by a bunch of what you'd classically call comprador bourgeoisie, a big bourgeoisie that's prepared to sell out the whole country to a foreign, i.e., Russian, even bigger bourgeoisie or capitalists or rich men, oligarchs, in order to get their share. And I mean, they're getting their share. I'd call them comprador in the sense that that's a bourgeoisie allied with a bigger imperial power, and they're living off what they can gain from being able to have control over particular, as he says, before it was certain industries, especially extractive industries, and then they benefited from the difference between what they got those for. They got their consignment and what they then delivered to the people. So now he shows the growth. So in the past, the East Donbass was quite dominant, and he has shown us that there's been a shift, and he's got this entrepreneurial economy. But what's happening now, you've got a national independence revolution. What it means is that some of the capitalists, the actual bourgeoisie, not what he's describing, as I said last week, is a petty bourgeoisie or petite bourgeoisie, lined up with some national capitalists who are willing to kind of fight for the independence of the nation. They're generally a little smaller than the really big guys, and that's so I wish that he could recognize that you have almost all the classes in society, except those total traitorous, comprador type bourgeoisie, will be able to pull together to gain the independence of the country and the people from this imperial group. And in fact, he's not very interested in that national imperial and anti-colonial struggle that we've often heard a lot of other authors talk about. So, and then there's another gap, I think. I'm trying to remember where I underlined it, but one of the things he doesn't notice enough, I wouldn't say he doesn't have sympathy, but he doesn't notice enough the actual sort of working class. He talks about the rural and small town workers. Was it just here, or am I still stuck in the last? Um, Right, the last chapter. At any rate, I think that, and I've mentioned before that I've encountered some people who are concerned about that, the very large proportion of the population that if the state chooses to step aside, all this, he's so happy about how people aren't concerned about their state, they're concerned about their dignity and their personal entrepreneurial style. But the fact is that if the state, its ability to support the really broad group of the people, those who do not become entrepreneurs or may not, or they're very small if they are entrepreneurs, or who are working for a wage and would like to have a solid contract and some benefits, and some security in life, that's the vast majority of the population. Um, I think that at any rate, there's a lot more one could say about this. It is good that he points out that Ukraine was able um, to develop domestically because there's an eternal, he doesn't say this, but there's an internal market in a big population that is able to build some kind of wealth and security for the whole population, and that's going on despite the troubles. I just want to say that he appears to be saying his shift to what he calls bourgeois, that I consider not that. He thinks that they've got rid of the oligarchs anyway, in short. And I'm sure he doesn't think that anymore. He knows they're still there. But I thought that that part we should probably keep in mind, that they're not that easy to get rid of, although a great deal has been done. That's just a thing I wanted to throw in. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Lexicon. I have this whole chapter. I had the feeling for the whole chapter that he is seeing progress more black and white than what's actually been happening. I don't know whether it's because we've had more time since then, or whether I almost had the feeling he was getting a little overly involved in his theories and not really seeing enough of what's going on the ground. But I do agree with you, though, the fact that he doesn't deal with that colonialist aspect of Russia is it's interesting. I mean, I guess his concern is mostly about the internal workings and the changes that were happening inside of Ukraine. But that is a major issue that he does not give a lot of emphasis to. Anyway, Adam, anything to add here?
Yeah, I've noticed that missing too throughout the book, and I think you're right. He's looking inward more than looking outward, but it's a factor that can't be ignored. And yeah, I think Hritsyak did a better job of illustrating that, and even Plochy as well.
And our next book, Russia and Ukraine: Entangled History, Diverging States, will definitely go into this again. So we'll be back to that. So this is a good. I guess in a lot of ways you can't cover every. No, you if a book tries to cover everything, it ends up covering nothing, or doing a half-ass job of everything. So we'll have to. I guess
One
that's
must
just
put focus on the ideational aspects of the socio-economic polity of postmodernism and, sorry.
I'm gonna have nightmares about this chapter. It's yeah. Well, no, exactly, Adam. Whatever the hell you said, I'm sure you're right.
Sure
Anyway,
sounded right.
yeah, boy, you could be a sociology professor. Anyway, it reminds me why after one course in sociology in college, I decided not to take any more. Though I'll tell you, just that certain fields are much more jargony than others, and I don't know. It seemed to me sociology, maybe because I didn't understand the jargon. Anyway, whatever. We're not. Well, let's just go on from here. Anyway, okay. So we talked about dignity and the leading edge nature of the ideas. Um, and okay, also the transformation from hierarchy to heterarchy, which I had to look up. That's another word I wasn't familiar with. A form of management or rule in which any unit can govern or be governed by others, depending on circumstances, and hence no one unit dominates the rest. Okay, that's what we was talking about before on the Maidan, of not having not having leaders as such. That people saw an issue and organized and took care of it. Um, horizontalizing social relations and the institutionalization of fairness, which we'll go into more in this chapter. Another question I had in all of this was how much what he is observing as a social phenomenon really is possible in government organization, whether it really is possible to not have a hierarchical government system. He seems to be implying that that's the direction that Ukraine is heading in. And I'm not so sure it can work, but I guess we'll have to see. You know. Okay. So anyway, okay, back to his analysis of the revolution of dignity as an instance of an ongoing and global transformation from modernity to post-modernity. And this includes a questioning of the post-World War II political institutions designed to guarantee peace. UN springs to mind, I assume probably NATO, the large international organizations. The fact that hierarchical corporations, traditionally organized corporations, were eclipsed by Google, Facebook, and Amazon using different organizational models. Again, I question whether Amazon has a different organizational model or not. It seems to me to be quite a regular, old-fashioned, extremely well-run, but a hierarchical um, organization. But feel free to disagree, anybody, if I'm not Yeah, Adam. Yeah.
Well, the Washington Post certainly agrees with you, or Bezos, that is.
Yeah, well, true. Yeah. Yes, well, yeah, whatever. Anyway, and okay, this is definitely the shift from material goods to experience economies, which includes social media, and this got me responsible purchasing. Do you notice people being more responsible about their purchases, Adam?
I, to be honest, I thought about this, but a little bit. You know what I mean? Like I've seen in rural Alberta, hang with me, lexicon. I've seen in rural Alberta a growth of buy local, and whether that be from a xenophobic like Texas of Canada front, you can't deny that this idea is spreading. I think it is, and completely anecdotally. But um, when I see rednecks at farmers markets, it gives me a little bit of hope in a certain way. Is that silly?
You know what? You're right. I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking about that. You don't see people anymore insisting, buying an F-150, and I'm buying it because it gets crappy gas mileage, and I want to, I want as much to be coming out of the tailpipe as possible. I don't care about water pollution. This is not. I mean, this 20, 30 years ago, you heard this more. It is true. People are slowly becoming. Are becoming more interested in the effects of their purchasing. Yeah, okay, I take it back. He's right. I guess
I
I've
mean,
gotten
I
used.
don't know if it's to the extent that he's saying, but when I was listening to it today, that's what it made me think of. I'm like, yeah, even some of these people that I know drive F-150s for that reason might still go and buy local carrots because they're better. And because, supporting farmers is kind of a universal across the blah, blah.
Easy for you to say. That is true. People do think about the effects of their purchases on the people that they're buying from. It's yeah, okay. It is. I guess we're making steps in the right direction that way. Um, okay, so postmodernism affects ethics, norms of legitimacy, systems of organization and communication at institutions. He's hoping for that anyway. In Ukraine, uh, it was the Revolution of Dignity was a transformative moment, and he talked about this before, and I think other of our authors have. The fact that Ukraine was sort of not right in the center of Europe; it's sort of on the periphery, made it possible for changes to happen that might not have been, that probably would not have happened in in France or in Germany, in the more central parts of Europe. So he says that elites using the position on the periphery of European civilization are able to create new institutions that could breathe life into these new ideas. And that is, as people have said, that the influence of Ukraine on the European Union once they join is going to be interesting because Ukraine has new and different ideas that could really breathe some life into some of the stale values of that in the European Union at this point. Lexicon, yeah.
I just wish to note for the record that the geographic center of Europe is in Ukraine. It's in Western Ukraine, but it's not on the border.
Well, of course, it's in Western Ukraine. It would sort of have to be, wouldn't it? With all my Halichina friends here, we couldn't actually put it in the East anywhere. Yeah, I actually have read that of course it depends on how you define center, but yes, yeah, I mean Ukraine is the center of my Europe. And by the way, speaking of Western Ukraine, Adam, on a little aside here, I was very pleased to note that Lviv Oblast is the very first oblast to be absolutely free of the Russian Orthodox Church. They have managed to shut them all down. Some of the churches joined with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the autocephalous church that's not connected to Russia, and some of these other organizations are shut down. So Lviv Oblast leads the way. of to the entire country of getting rid of really a cancer on the public. The KGB Church no longer has churches in Lviv Oblast. So, congratulations all around. All right.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's excellent. And I mean, it's not like people can't still worship in their Eastern Rite in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. I'm sorry, but part of my religion is having a KGB agent at the pulpit. What is wrong?
As far as I know, you are free to move to Russia. Yeah, it's this is I'm out of sympathy for that kind of thing. Yeah, and I think it is true. I'm sure some worshipers in some of these churches were just good people who went there because that's the church they went to, and were not necessarily aware of what was going on. But the Russian Orthodox Church as an institution in Ukraine was a fifth column, was caught again and again. Spreading disinformation, undermining, the rule of law in Ukraine and things like that. And it's, it astounds me that they were put up with for so long. Yeah, madam.
Which Soviet leader brought back? Because I remember at some point during the Soviet Union, they were like, okay, you can have the Russian Orthodox Church. Who was that? Which guy? Which old, fat, white, corrupt guy?
Oh, that doesn't narrow it down much.
I know.
Was it Brezhnev?
Okay, we could call it
I'll take
Brezhnev's
Brezhnev for
church.
$250.
From now on.
No, I don't know. But
Brezhnev's KGB acephalate patriarchy, or you know what I mean. Yeah. Tracy, please go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to say that SBU, of course, has over 90 cases against those fake KGB priests, everything from propaganda to paedophilia and anything in between. And actually, also, one of them was operating a drone school for the Russians. That's not what priests should do, is it? So, thank you, SBU.
Wow, amazing! I had no idea there were that many. Yeah, I haven't looked at the New Testament lately, but I don't I don't remember discussions of blessing drones and that kind of thing. Yeah. Anyway, boy, that's Tracy, this was such a wonderful thing speaking to Gorza again today. The SBU is an amazing organization. They do a lot of good, and thank you for that for being here and letting us 90. Wow, that's a lot. All right, okay, but back on task here. Civilizational shift is page 309. This is the next section. In this case, the Maidan is part of the third wave of civilizational shift. Now we'll try to discuss what that means. The earlier shift to modernity, as opposed to post-modernity now, but when the revolutions that brought in modernity, the American French revolutions, the Russian Revolution, resulted in urbanization, industrialization, the rise of consumerism, mass literacy, and numeracy, and the development of states and companies that were hierarchically organized and bureaucratically managed. The depersonalized applications of legal norms, which basically means a level playing field to some extent. Meritocracy, monarchy.
Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, sorry.
There's another one. There's another
Yes.
one. No, you don't have to be sorry. He could have said it easier, but he's a sociology professor.
Exactly.
We love him, but it's kind of silly. He should Schneiderize his books. He should get Klitzak or Snyder to edit this stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Am I losing your sound?
I don't know what happened to Robin's sound. I thought I lost it, but maybe you should go ahead.
Are you hearing me now?
Got you now.
Do you hear me? Okay, good. Who knows? Anyway, go ahead, Lexicon.
I just wish to tell you that I've just Googled who brought the church back. For God's sake, it was Joseph Stalin in 1943.
That's what I thought, but I didn't want to say.
Seriously?
You were right. Go with your hunch, Adam. He actually met with these church leaders and agreed to use the resources of the state to support the church and bring it back in, and so on and so on. It's appalling to read, but it's so totally Stalin. Amazing.
Oh, but at the same time, that's right. Ritzak does say something in the Ukrainian Christmas about that. But at the same time, they were having kids like think on their parents if they celebrated Christmas and that kind of a thing. So it's very, very schizo. I guess the church was brought back just to serve the purposes that Stalin wanted it to serve, but not
As
to
I
actually be a
recall,
church.
it was part of the deal for them to promote the cult of the Great Patriotic War, probably. Like, oh, well, we won this war and we need people to, that's
Yeah,
how I would think.
1943. Wow.
Slava Stalinisku Hristu. Ninaviki Vike.
Oh dear, Adam. uh, yeah.
Amen.
Stalinska pomeluj, Господи, Stalinska agenda.
Господи, помилуй, подай,
Stalinska
Господи. You're
pomeluj.
good. You got a white voice there. That's great.
Я пішов в хору, коли я був малий, співав в церкві трошки.
Nice course in how to say that A sound. Good. I think that must be Western Ukrainian.
Adam, that's beautiful. So, folks, we've had our little Ukrainian Catholic hour here. Now we can go back to.
No. That was the Russian Stalinist Orthodox
Oh, I'm sorry.
lady.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. I take it back. Yes. uh, I went to when during the last the Ukrainian Fair in Manhattan. It's run by St. George Ukrainian Catholic Church, and they had a service on when I was there. The liturgy is so beautiful in that tradition. I mean, the music is just gorgeous and whatever. Anyway, but I'm crazy about everything Ukrainian at this point, so I guess it's not that surprising. All right. Anyway, okay. Now we're going from modernity to 21st century post-modernity or post-industrial organization. So he contrasts the post-enlightenment in modernity, the post-enlightenment European intellectual development called for individualism. That was the big value, individualism. The 1960s European uprisings moved toward network solidarity, a rejection of hierarchy and idealism over materialism. By the early 21st century, and this is when we had the Occupy movements, the Arab Spring, and the Maidan, the Revolution of Dignity, this continued in this direction. Smartphones and social media enabled a shift from mass media, which was the hierarchical dissemination of information at a single point, to a more horizontal interaction, which was used to full advantage. I think this is a very important point too. Is the government was less and less able to direct the news and to decide what people were going to find out about. Adam, go ahead.
I think Zelon's got something to say about that. Like, I understand what he's saying, and it has been a great tool for revolutions in the last, since the Arab Spring and through Maidan. But oh boy, howdy, is it not doing what it's supposed to do to most of the population? Am I right?
Well, certainly, social media near all of us, which is yeah. I find it frightening to see the insidious influence of Russian misinformation in all of our media outlets, and not only in social media outlets, but even in the traditional outlets. With the last week, the massive attacks on Ukraine. I mean, incredibly. I've forgotten the numbers now, but incredible numbers of bombs and missiles and drones, and destruction of a large part of what was left of the energy infrastructure didn't show up. I couldn't find anything in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. Anything. CNN, I could only find it by doing a search for Ukraine, and then I finally got a couple of articles, but nowhere near the main page of any of these. But at the same time, what's going on in Syria, what's going on Georgia does also not. But what's going on in other countries gets a lot of coverage, and you have to wonder about the fact that the areas that Russia might not want to have covered seem to get a lot less coverage. I can prove nothing, but it's very suspicious to me, and it stinks a little bit.
Yeah, and I
Anyway,
often felt during the first Trump presidency that he was like this constant scandal machine cover for all geopolitics. And it was just a constant daily what the dinkus tweeted, and none of it had any relevance to important things going on elsewhere.
yeah,
And I
that's
think we'll
true. I
see
mean,
it again.
yeah, that's an important technique too. You mess up, you fill up the information space with idiocy, and there's no room for the real news. Yeah, it's a very yeah. Oh God, what a world we live in. Anyway, all right, but back to what was going on in the early 21st century. Um, uh, and this we certainly see in the Maidan, was the demand for justice in an ethical sense, which is not the same as economic equality. He says it's better stated as fairness as an element of universal ethics or natural law, not not statutory legality, which could be abused by wealthy, powerful elite. In fact, we'll see as we go on here that the distinction that's made in Ukraine, and still is to this day, between the country and the government, and very clear, you know, great attachment and belief, patriotism toward the country, much more suspicion about the government, which is, I think, warranted given the history. Um, anyway, so this this change in philosophy shows a shift to idealism and the value of collective governance, the power function of a person of influence rather than of authority of office or from wealth. Again, who was it who mentioned that the oligarchs are not gone yet, so the wealth still does have quite a bit of authority, but this was a shift in what people valued the most. Lexica.
Well, I wondered what you guys think about this idea because I was thinking, well, what do all these people, let's say in America or Canada, but certainly in these last few elections, talking about the deep state and all this, and they think they all love America, but they don't like the government. So what, like, is that what he's saying? I wondered what people think about this. Like, where is this not true? In a sense, like people all say they love their country, but it's become quite the fashion to dislike the government, the state, the deep state, whatever you want to call it. Is it just that? Like, is he sucking himself into something more than he thought at the time?
No, that is an interesting thing. I think this may be a symptom of of, as he calls it, postmodernism generally. Because I remember when I was a kid, there was, people had a lot of faith in the government, and the government as the corporate expression of nationality of the state. That we certainly don't see anymore. But yeah, I think you're right. This certainly is not something that is unique to Ukraine. It may be, I think it's a little more pronounced in Ukraine, in part because they dealt with the Soviet government, and Ukrainians had a lot of experience with a government that did not represent their interests. And that, they that's something that people remark on the post-Soviet space, the cynicism that you find in large parts of the post-Soviet space toward government, and so it may just. I think you're right. I think this is something you see generally, the suspicion of government at this point, but it didn't used to be that way. I mean, did you find that in
I
Canada
think
too?
it's more, yeah, yes, lots, but it's not solutions based. And I think overall, like the weave he's weaving here is like when he gets into personalism and the fact that freedoms come with responsibilities, and so like, and this is what I witnessed in Ukraine was this suspicion of the government in the same way that you see here, but here it's like it's colored and distorted and rotted from the inside by Ruski Mir to mean like don't trust any institutions ever, right? Whereas Ukrainians, and I think this is like Hritsyak, I'm using up one of my notes later, but Hritsyak talks about the paternal the paternalist like nature of the Orange Revolution, like Yushchenko's gonna fix it all for us and we'll just leave. And so like I think it's a little different. There's nuance because what I witnessed in Ukraine is that everyone's behind Zelensky, everyone's behind the war effort, but there's no worship of Zelensky. And even Zelensky himself is like, put up pictures of your kids. I don't want my picture in your office, government workers or anyone the fuck else. And I think that's kind of, I don't know. I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, but does that help, Lexicon?
Yeah, no, I think you're good there. That you're clear. Um, and I understand that you say there's nuance because we do hear the way people say it. Then this other thought comes into my head. In Russia, they, of course, say or have to say, and their propagandists all say they love their country and their government. In fact, they love their government and state and their supreme high commander. They call him Supremo and stuff, or at least in the translations we see. But they're constantly expressing if the supreme says that it has to be done, it has to be done. They love to say things like that.
Vladimirovich.
Yes. They're really craven, aren't they? It's
They're so
disgusting.
craven, but
Yeah,
it
exactly.
shows the brittleness of their power, right? This is what I say to people's faces in Texas of Canada here, Lexicon, when people are like, Justin Trudeau's a dictator. I'm like, you would get arrested for saying that in Russia. If I heard you say that in Russia, I would be compelled to report you, and then you would be in jail for 8 years. Like now, show trial, bye-bye. So yeah, he sucks. And he's been prime minister maybe for too long, but calling him a dictator is stupid, and you're stupid. And then I got fired
But but
or
it is
kicked off
true.
that job site. Very smart, so they can't fire me all the way.
Oh, good for you.
That
No,
didn't
it is.
happen.
It is.
Full
It did.
disclosure. But I did say the first part of it to someone. Like, if you said that in Russia, that the leader is a dictator, and they're just like, wow. But bike lanes and chicks with dicks, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's in the US and in Canada, I think we're so we're very complacent about our freedoms. We don't even notice them. I mean, yeah, the fact that anybody could say, I mean, any American president is a dictator. I mean, there's people are like losing their minds about Trump being elected. They're going to move out of the country because it's going to be a fascist government, and no, it's not. I mean, it may be terrible, but it's if you want to see what bad is like, look at Russia. Look at look at places where there are actual dictators. We should even in the worst situation, I think we're pretty fortunate with what we've got. But anyway, that's just me. Anyway, one okay, and one of the well, I was going to say one of the things too that I find really very positive in the Ukrainian attitude toward the state and toward, as you're saying, Zelensky. Zelensky is nobody's idol. I think I think that Slava Vakarchuk is more of an idol in Ukraine than President Zelensky ever would be. Um, but there's a really deep and quiet.
And that's good.
And that's good. Exactly. Oh, 100%. Yeah, yeah. That was my point. Zelensky, there's a very deep respect for him. And I mean, this is something about Ukrainian society in general that I find so positive is it is a very respectful society. It really looks at and values people, and there is as I was saying, there's a lot of respect for President Zelensky, but he isn't a figurehead. He's acknowledged as a human being. Someone like I mean, in total contrast, someone like Putin, he's a god until he's the devil, because he's set up as this other, this not someone not a normal human being. But when people turn on a person like that, then they get like Ceausescu, whatever. They get hung up on a lamppost. Um, Zelensky is not a figurehead, so he's if people become dissatisfied with him, they're dissatisfied with the person who they still have some respect for. So it's a much more adult and healthier way, I think, of conducting oneself. But anyway, okay. Now the next section is called A Revolution of Dignity. I love this part of the chapter, Adam, because I love things about language, and we go in this. I hope I don't bore everybody to tears, but I just found this fascinating. He goes into this is where a lot of Snyder, Ritzak, Plochy, and Wynnyckyj, these are people who are Ukrainian speakers. They understand the language. They really understand the words that are being used, and it brings such a dimension that you miss with some earlier writers who wrote about things they might have understood a lot about, but we weren't really inside of the culture because they didn't necessarily have the language ability. So this I found absolutely fascinating. Okay, dignity, as in the Revolution of Dignity, was a powerful rallying cry for millions and beyond Ukraine. Also, it had roots in the Enlightenment. It was viewed by many as an extension of individual rights. But there's a problem with this word. In traditional European, meaning feudal society, pre-modern society, the word dignity really meant high social status and honors and respectful treatment that were due solely to the landed gentry. It was based on noble birth. Dignity was something that certain classes of society had. It was not a universal value. After the French Revolution, it was seen as a fundamental and universal human right, as in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Geneva Convention, the German Grundgesetz. And I'm not sure what you meant here, Adam, so over to you.
Wait, what did I say? Why did my computer fall asleep? Oh, here we have the source of. No, there's a couple times, and I don't know which book it was probably all of them, where I tried to explain hedonist. So please check all that from the record and then read this part of the chapter, and then you'll know what I was talking about.
Oh, very good. Okay. Yeah, it's we when we look at words in other languages, we tend to find uh, a similar word and assume that the whole constellation around the world is the same. But they have a funny little story, and then we'll get back to this. I was having this discussion with Ilya in Ukrainian a few weeks ago, and he's telling me about a release and a program, but using the English words. And to me, a program can mean a computer program, can mean a itinerary of something. It can mean going to a lecture, whatever. And same thing with release. It has a lot of different meanings. But it turned out that he was using the words the way the English words are used in Ukrainian, which is solely a program is solely, and the only meaning when a Ukrainian uses it is a computer program. A release means nothing to anybody in Ukrainian except for 1.0, 1.5, 2.0, a release of a computer program. It was very funny because we had a 5-minute conversation. I'm trying to figure out what the hell he was talking about, and he keeps on saying, "But those are English words." Anyway, so whatever. I thought it was funny, but this is here when we talk about hedonist, about dignity. In some ways, and I use the word hedonist in part of our outline here because I think it's sometimes a little bit clearer to not use that equivalent word in your own language when it doesn't actually mean exactly the same thing. So, but what he says is the word hedonist or hednosti, the Revoluция Hednosti is called in Ukrainian, Revolution of Dignity. It has nothing to do with status or rank or privilege. That the word doesn't mean having dignity because of your rank. It's a set of traits that characterize a person's positive moral qualities, and this is very important, it's a comprehension by the person of their civic worth and civic responsibility relationship to others. No reference to status or hierarchy. So this is really quite a different word than the dignity is as he described it as being something that belonged to the landed aristocracy. In Chydnis, the Ukrainian word, uh, means the things that make you a good and a moral person, and your worth to society as the acknowledgement and your understanding of your worth to others also. Um, so this, it is well, it's a different concept, and it makes a lot of this clearer. And as I said here, he goes on, and I don't know why he does this because I guess he's a Russian speaker too. He goes on about this big comparative thing about how these words are used in Russian, and I honestly don't give a shit how any of the things are used in Russian. So we're skipping to the next part of the chapter. There. Anyway, okay. Dignity, chidnist, is the fundamental.
Pronounced in
Yes,
Russian though.
Adam. I'm sure it's something ugly. Anyway, anyway, whatever. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. You see this in Ukrainian scholarship a little bit. You see this coming out in discussions generally with Ukrainians. There still is a little bit of this feeling of inadequate, inadequacy or second-rateness as opposed to the great Russian state and the great Russian culture and language. I mean, I don't think any Ukrainians believe that anymore, but it does pop its head up sometimes, and it's going to take another couple of generations to get rid of that. uh, and to see. I mean, certainly, I think, if you want to say who's got the better of the two, I would definitely take Ukraine over Russia any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Anyway, yeah,
They
literally
got
twice
us
on
beat
Sunday.
on lower incisor size.
Oh, well, it's good. I'm glad they have something going for them. Actually, those who still have their teeth. My dentist is originally from Belarus, and his description of Soviet dentistry, it's amazing anybody has a tooth in their mouth. Uh, anyway, but that is another issue. Actually, it's interesting. I mean, that does relate to the lack of respect for individual rights and individual value. Just the fact that you can't get a decent dentist from what I've heard. I mean, you've seen pictures of these soldiers, and they pick them up on the front lines. Very few of them seem to have a whole full set of teeth in their head. But if you don't value individuals, what do you care about their teeth falling out either? It's not a societal value, I guess. Anyway, whatever. Okay. So dignities are saying, okay, so dignity is a fundamental principle according to which society is organized in this view. It constrains the state from violating individual rights, and it's a social force that constrains individuals from violating the rights of others. Dignity is the principle which is actualized in the practice of respect. And he says, it was in the sense that the Maidan protesters demanded recognition or respect for their individual and collective chidnis, their dignity. And this is something I think many people who, as they've come to know Ukrainians, you are struck by the quiet dignity that so many Ukrainians have. It's just they're it's a of self of value of self-worth that it's but one that doesn't require it being in anybody else's face. It's an acknowledgement, which I think partly probably is growing up from in a society that has this as a value. um anyway, okay. Oh, this is interesting, Adam. Explain what you mean by this, because I'm not that I didn't do that well with On Freedom. Anyway, over to you.
Levon has something to say about it. Give me a minute.
The dog voice is heard. Okay. um Anyway, Adam said that he compares hedonist to what Snyder speaks about in On Freedom. James is here. James is our On Freedom expert. Any thoughts
That's
on
who I
that?
wanted to comment on it. I was just saying this sounds like a lot like the last chapter, James, of On Freedom.
Government. Government. Yeah. What about the last chapter, though? I
Well,
mean,
maybe
that's
the whole book, like his whole, like to me, what he was describing in On Freedom was basically hedonist. It was like you get your cake, but you got to pay for it with some social decency and not being a dink.
Oh,
is
that.
my
Yeah, yeah,
tradesman
well, yeah.
summation of on freedom. There you go.
Well, it's a great thing. It's what we all hope our government. Well, this isn't true, is it? Not all of us hope for the same thing. So that's the rub. Is not everybody's into the whole thing, but it is that social contract that you get these good things, and he defines them, and he actually goes pretty far to the left, which I don't mind a bit. As far as I'm concerned, it's a good thing to consider that every child perhaps is even forced into a public classroom so that they can experience what it's like to talk to people who are potentially different than themselves, by reducing kind of these what do we want to call those? Not thought bubbles. What am I trying to think of here? These echo chambers that can happen. Avoiding those. So he does that with school. He's like, this is what we ought to have, and he's dictating other things, which I think are fantastic. Along with education, again, he's saying get rid of screens in classrooms. Just let the kids and the teachers' aides, whoever, whatever people there are, let them learn from that mode of teaching, which has worked really well for us. And it doesn't shut down the dialogue, it increases the dialogue. So, those are two examples of sort of his extreme about, what ought to happen. And some of his ideas about the press are pretty far out there that there ought to be you know, he just goes on and on about things. Now, you can take that too far, I think, and it makes it controversial. But he speaks a lot of common sense. So I don't know what there is to compare all these great things that we need in a society and that make it better because we're protected. But I don't know how to compare it to what's in your book. So the rest of the way, you'd have to kind of do the comparison.
Well, I think it's about responsibility, right? Like that. Like that's what I love about hedonist is it's not just about my own my own rights and freedoms. It's the knowledge that I'm on the boat with all of you, and that my freedom to stick my elbow out on our tight boat is reduced by the location of my co-citizens' heads. And so therefore, and like being open-minded and being educated and trying to be aware of a bubble that you might be in is as hard as that is for all of us. And I don't know, all of it. I just see in Ukraine, like I'm a big pumper up of Ukraine, but and he's a little bit silly in his book, but I really see like a path to the future and a better future through people, um and it's hard work, but it starts with good publicly available education. And I had this crazy idea that maybe we should have like government mandated um potlucks every once a month, with
That's
people
so Canadian. I
with
love it.
people in your neighborhood, right? Whether they be wearing a scarf or whatever, and just being forced to sit down and eat with these people that you might disagree with or not trust, who are your neighbors, and then therefore realize that yeah, people are just people, and the real enemies are the ones who want to prevent us from voting ever again, and they're doing
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, I like that, Adam. I think that's very true. In fact, one of the things that many of our writers have pointed out about what went on the Maidan was the fact that that shepherd from Zakarpattia with the tech entrepreneur from Kiev and the miner from Donbass, the people who never would have been in the same room with each other, that they were all there working together, getting to know each other, the Russian speakers and the Ukrainian speakers, that everything that this is, and this is how you build a society as opposed to a bunch of individuals. And I think that that's a very important thing. When I was a kid, it was just getting to the end of what used to be assumed in schools in the United States. There used to be citizenship classes or civics classes where you were taught about our values and you were taught about, and among other things, about your responsibilities as a citizen. That went out the window. I remember I had actually had a little bit of a disagreement with Alan Dershowitz at one point. He came to the law school to speak, and he's talking all about his he was big into into human rights and everything, which is great. But I raised my hand and I said, well, what about our responsibilities as citizens? As when I tell my children that they can get certain things, but they have responsibilities in the family too to do certain things. So what about our responsibilities to our fellow citizens? And he absolutely cut me off at the knees and said, no, that's nothing to do with it. Its rights are the only thing that matters. Well, I got news for him, and we're seeing in Ukraine that this is not the case, that rights are important. But if we want to have a functioning civil society, that our obligations to each other and to society are a very important part of the whole thing. And this is why Ukraine has a successful society, much more so than in many other countries. James, go ahead.
Well, listen, we don't have to do that. That's hard work. It sounds like there's a lot of obligations there. I think we just ought to hire a strong man to do it, somebody who can fix it all by himself.
You're in luck. We just elected one.
Well, then, see, we're halfway there then. Anyway, no, I mean, that is sort of the choice, though. And I think about Ukraine a little differently than I did 2 years ago. No, a lot differently. One of the things is I see that they are no longer reaching for that solution anymore, or at least they're cutting down on it. And that's that's great. And Zelensky, and you mentioned it, Adam, about the don't hang pictures of me, hang pictures of your kids. That's so important to get over that idea that the strong man fixes everything, that it really is a collective effort to be a better society. But it is so easy to sell that strongman thing because things are a mess, man. And until we get somebody in who really knows, Adam, like me, because only that's really attractive to people ultimately because it comes with threats and promises, right? It comes with these like, you got to watch out for so and so's, and it's so textbook. But I had a question for you guys too, but off this topic, and I'll quickly insert it, and you don't have to talk about it. But um, God and church coming back into the USSR, brought in by Stalin, that is a bit of a surprise. So I went and looked at chapter 1 of The Road to Unfreedom to kind of review how that was going. And one of the things that Ilian, I'm calling him that, Snyder says Eileen, but whatever, Ilan, he is saying things like Russia's the homeland of God, basically. And so it really did sort of make sense. So I feel more resolved about that, but I'll stop there, cut that off, go back to your book, and maybe we can talk about it later.
Yeah. Thanks, James. That is true. I'd forgotten about that. That whole sacralization of Russia as pretty much as the seat of God, and the leader as the savior, which I mean is pretty it's pretty perverse,
Sacrilegious.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. Anyway, okay, we're up to the section called "From Individualism to Personalism" now, page 317. Um, okay, so he reiterates that hiddeness, dignity, has two meanings. One is the inherent quality of a person, in other words, the unassailable value of the person. The second is the ethical attitude, the respect of society to that person. The social aspect is the most relevant to the novel senses produced on the Maidan, on and by the Maidan. President Biden just pardoned his son Hunter. Okay, very nice. Anyway, so dignity is possible within a collectivity of mutual respect, and this comes close to a philosophical theory that I hadn't heard before, although I've asked people, and it was just me, called personalism. which emphasizes the centrality of the socially embedded person as a starting point for moral and political reflection. That dignity is only possible when that collectivity of mutual respect, interpersonal communion with others is fundamental to the human condition. I think we can all, we all understand that, and it, this is sort of an antidote to excessive individualism. Okay, I did look this up. Personalism, a philosophy that could critique both the idea that economic prosperity is the final ends of individuals and societies, and at the same time coherently argue against a collectivist system that denies private property, stifles free speech, and suppresses the freedom of religion. So this is personalism is a way to, it's a middle path between between collectivism, communism, and excessive selfish individualism. What did not surprise me at all is that both St. Edith Stein and Pope John Paul II and many other Catholic scholars were prominent in the development of this philosophy. So, as I said, here we go again with the Western Catholic influence in Ukraine, as our friend Fritzak was always talking about. But again, this is as the point that Fritzak made, that it was that Western influence of Aquinas and Aristotle and all of the, the things that the Western Church emphasized that made Ukraine such a different place from Russia, and the fact that this personalism, this philosophy, is deeply embedded in the Catholic Church, and in Western Christian thought. I think even in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is in the same environment as the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and in Poland and the Roman Catholic Church. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Adam, you have another comment here.
How can I comment when I'm looking up the real spelling of sacrilegious? I don't know. I'm probably gullible, but convincing your fellow humans that freedom comes with responsibility sounds like a good plan to me. The big problem is jerk faces, hurling feces. Am I right, bros? But really, I think it addresses a big hole in our individualistic, entitled, postmodern society. I mean, we have these Bill of Rights, and then we've got this giant, codex of laws to keep us in line. And then we've got this Bill of Rights, but nowhere do they tell us how to be not very, not jerk-faced citizens and realize when we're hurting others and our rhetoric is silly and trying to be, I don't know. I'm not very good at it, but I think it's a great idea. You know what I'm saying?
I absolutely agree with you, and I think it's something that, I think in my grandparents' generation, my grandmother would be horrified at the selfishness of many of our fellow citizens these days. Because she was very much she was always involved in lots of volunteer work and charity work and just taking care of her neighbors. This is the way things were. We've lost that. Ukraine has not. And again, as we've said before, this is one of the gifts that Ukraine will be able to give the world, and certainly give to the European Union, is exporting some of that attitude to the rest of the world. I hope Ukraine manages to hold on to it, because it's a really very precious thing. It's Okay, so transcendence is a central concept. Uh, inherent human aptitude for something he calls vertical transcendence, which I was not really. I had trouble with some of his terminologies. That vertical transcendence is the capacity to distinguish good from evil. So I guess vertical meaning going up and down, going to the divine. This is Pope John Paul II spoke about this, that distinguishing good from evil, and understanding good as a manifestation of the divine image that religious people, Will's not here, I can talk about religion, that people believe that each human being is created in the divine image. But then the other kind of transcendence is called horizontal transcendence, which are deep and lasting bonds between people. To be human means to organically combine individuality and the mutual. And I was thinking, Adam, and I have a note that I want to mention here, but what I was thinking, I have a number of Ukrainian friends, people who've come recently from Ukraine. And one of the things they comment on is how lonely they are here. And it's not just a matter of language. I think it's a matter of also that we don't, in the United States, we're still rugged individualists. We don't build connections with people. The thing that I think people in Ukraine have grown up just sort of assuming. And it's a sad thing, but it's something that, it's something that I think it's, well, I mean, here at the Volya Radio, we had a meeting this morning of just a lot of people who were involved with it, and we really do have wonderful connections with each other. And this is certainly what makes life beautiful. Is it's not your rugged individualism and the things you get for yourself; it's your connection to other people. So again, something we can learn about this. I wanted to mention. Okay, did I read this already? To be human means organic combine individuality and the mutual. I did, and this I noticed this. I try to watch Ukrainian television on YouTube. They have a live stream up sometimes. I'm beginning to be able to understand what they're talking about, which is nice. But on 1+1, Odin plus Odin, the big used to be Kolomoisky's network. It's one of the biggest networks in Ukraine. Under the 1+1 on the right-hand corner of the screen, it has under it, and it always says there, Te Neoden, which means you are not one. In other words, you're not alone. And I just think it's such a beautiful thing, and it's always sitting there. If you watch that network, that's always there, reminding people 24/7. You're not alone. Te Neoden, you're part of us. And I just thought that was a beautiful representation of exactly what he was talking about. All right.
It's time for some
Yeah.
Ukrainian colored heart emojis.
Oh, okay. Go for it. Here comes the yellow. There we go. Slava Ukraini.
I dare not
Oh,
change my emoji off of blue, at least until you change yours off of yellow, the heart
yeah. Yes,
color.
we'll have to. Well, it's. I'm sure Elma any day will have a blue and yellow heart that he's going to let us use. Anyway, would be nice. Okay, so let's see. Okay, there's a community basis for public sovereignty in this setup, and what is happening is a rejection of the post-enlightenment supremacy of the individual, where ordered social interaction was thought to be a result of a social contract only, and the social contract was basically the concept of social contract means that individuals each felt it was to their benefit to join in the social contracts to get what they wanted. The idea of contract law in general, that a contract is only struck when both sides feel that they're getting a benefit of the deal. Basic first day in contracts law. That's what they tell us, and it's very true. And so this was when you talk about a social contract. Really, this is the same thing. It means people only, if you're talking about social contract rather than about this connectedness, people only will abide by that social contract as long as they think that they're getting more out of it than they're having to give, which just is an extension, I think, of the basic selfishness of this supremacy of the individual. This is not for personalists, in the Ukrainian traditional or the Ukrainian post-Maidan approach. Community comes before the establishment of any political institution. The political authority was derived from the community. So no social contract. There was a cohesive community, and out of that cohesive community, political authority came. Um, and he points out another word that in the Ukrainian constitution, the word narod is used, not derzhava. Narod means okay, Adam, help me with this. It means a people, sort of. It means
Yeah,
it is a yeah,
like a people, like a nation, but
right.
it emphasizes the collective group of people versus any sort of state institution.
Which is Держава is very much government. But in the Ukrainian constitution, this is a it's the term that they use is a term that means a social union, not a collection of individuals. It's interesting. A lot of this, and this is where I think he does really a lot of his what I think are he goes a little far with some of this. But when he goes back into the language, you do see that this obviously was part of the value system, because that word would not have been the word that had been chosen otherwise. Also interesting. But on the other side of it, we've talked about this before. There's a corollary effect of this respect for the community and this horizontal transcendence, is that the rejection or skepticism of anyone who aspires to leadership. Um, and we certainly see that. It's I mean, the fact that President Zelensky is so admired, it was an uphill battle for him to get to that point. He definitely earned it, but people are very suspicious of people in leadership roles. We saw that on the Maidan with the three or four people who were representatives of the minority parties, who uh, tried to show some leadership, and just were not taken unbidden. They had the Klitschko and the other people. Poroshenko was there. They tried to make agreements with Yanukovych, and the people on the Maidan just said, no, we're not doing it. It's just we're not. This is not. You're not going to make these decisions for us. And that was the big difference between the Revolution of Dignity and the Orange Revolution. Um, as he says, and this is where I think this is the next stage, and it's going to be interesting to see how this played out, is there are still no institutional expression of the values of the Ukrainian Revolution. Um, and he sees these values as a mix between Western individualism and Slavic collectivism with respect to responsibility. I'm not sure this is 100% true at this point. I do think that there are in some institutions in Ukraine. Um, I mean, certainly for one, Ukrainian Catholic University is a very much in the model of the Maidan value system, and it's a very influential institution in all of Ukraine. It's not just a college in Lviv. It really has a lot of influence. So I think perhaps this is something that has grown a little bit in the last few years since this book you know, was uh, was published. Um, anyway,
I
anything
believe the
to add on that?
authors of Zelensky Effect would have something to say about that. And, let's not hero worship Zelensky, but I think the Ukrainian government over the last 5 or 6 years since the writing of this book has, and I think Tracy can back me up, done a pretty good job of illustrating these values, right, buddy?
Tracy, I think you're the buddy here.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't 100% sure then, and I didn't want to butt in, but yeah, absolutely right, Adam. I completely agree, of course.
Yeah, good. Okay, we all agree. I think that's okay. Lexicon, go ahead.
Trying to remember if this is the point I wanted to make or not. There's yeah, I have repeatedly said, or no, I don't know if but anyway, I think that it's excellent that this he develops the hedonist dignity concept and the Ukrainian understanding of it. I'm glad that he does show that there is this collectivism in the sense of responsibility. And I guess I just wanted to add a point to that the concept of human rights. he's talked about that, the rights that a human has by virtue of being a human being. They just have this dignity and it must be respected. So I think in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights kind of idea, all persons, which he sort of referred to that kind of thinking, all persons have these rights, and individuals, people as those small parts of the collective entity are rights bearers in the concepts of universal human rights, and states, big institutions are so human beings, people are also rights claimants, rights bearers, rights claimants. That is, they have a right to claim these rights. But I have a right to go to school. I have a right to the dignity of work. And states are duty bearers. That is, the state, because it is this powerful entity with all this coercive power and all these resources, it bears responsibilities towards the people. And that's a really so when you're working in UN type stuff, you have to be able to develop policy in the sense of a human rights based approach. So if you're talking about supporting national minorities or gender, helping women, working against violence against women, for the rights of children, you need to be able to show at the same time as those humans have a claim on these rights that they hold, that states have a responsibility. To me, that's the other side of it that's important, and so they've got to be drawn up. They've got to be like transparent and accountable in the sense that are they properly according to all of the people under their responsibility access to those rights. So it means you got to do something different for those who are in a weaker position and so on. To me, that's the other side of the coin that should be expressed to help. To me, it's more, more developed than the notion of social contract that I always hated, because it's not a contract between two equal parts, is it? Like the state is powerful. And if we don't recognize that it needs to be accountable before the people, then how do all the people get the dignity of full access to all of these rights equally? Even those who have a harder time achieving it, like those with handicaps, for example, have got a right to be assisted so that they can get access to schooling, to public transport, to that kind of thing, healthcare. So I think that's an important dimension that I don't
Yeah.
think he refers to. Thanks.
Well, yeah, he does. He does talk a little bit later about the schools, inclusive schooling and that kind of thing as a result of Maidan values. But yeah, anyway,
Yeah,
That's
that's
what I
good.
on
That's
missed.
right.
yeah,
Sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
that's what I missed, and I'm glad James has his hand back up in terms of my linking on this and on freedom. In my brain is hedonist, to me, is the same concept as libe in on freedom. Please discuss, James, and also say
Ah,
what you wanted to say.
interesting.
Lieben was it core? Yeah, the actual living being versus the
Live,
body.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I just want to say that, yeah, thank you, Lexicon, for saying what you did about that positive assertion that people can have toward these rights. And it reminds me that, um, I was, before this war began, there was such a thing. I was on Twitter, and there were some people I was chatting with, and they did not know about what's in the United Nations laws, right? They didn't know about the various rights that are proposed in there. And so, what I wanted to say about that is no more than that Ukraine really leans on international law right now very strongly, and that is just and right. And it's a really good idea to do that because it should find the broadest set of supporters out there to their way of thinking. That ought to be, a winning hand that they've got in terms of what they're saying. People have a right to. And anyways, I just wanted to note that they really have tied themselves to the United Nations rules, at least, if not the order of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, being tied too closely to the United Nations or other things may not be the best. Yeah. Okay. I had something else. Oh, I know what it was, folks. Adam made a matching challenge here, and we've spent $50 of his money, but there's still some money on the table to help SBU Alpha Unit, the Special Operations Unit, one of the elite uh, uh, special forces units in Ukraine, doing an incredible amount of good. And they're elite in the sense that they're very good at their jobs and highly respected. They are not elite in the sense that they have all the equipment they need, because unfortunately, no matter how well Ukraine tries to outfit all of their military, they just don't have everything. In part because they have some partners who just are not getting the stuff to them in an efficient manner. You know who I'm talking about. But anyway, the one of the things that is very important for them is to have optics that allow them to see better what the enemy is up to and to see them farther away. It gives them much more survivability. These guys work behind enemy lines a lot of the time. Is special operations is like Green Berets or the Navy SEALs in the United States. Um, and you have an opportunity right now to make your money double by if anything that's donated until the end of book club. Adam is doubling up to what, $250? I think you said, Adam, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah,
or 750,000 Canadian dollars.
or 50 million
Thanks,
rubles.
tariffs
Yes.
that don't even exist yet.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's spend Adam's money, folks. We're getting close. We've got 4,500 now. It would be if we can match what Adam has put up, that'll get us very close to $5,000. It would be a really great way to end this week. So anyway, thank you, folks. Okay, now back to business here. Um, the next the next section is called the Community of Fairness. On page 322. He starts out talking about one of my absolute favorite words in Ukrainian. And when I learn languages, I always get favorite words. Spilkovatися. Spilkovatися can be translated as to speak, to talk to other people, whatever. But it has an element of communication, of really sitting down and sharing hearts, that you don't see in other words. And as I said in my notes here, I first heard this. I heard this word the first time from Wardago, so it's always going to be it's about a special place in my heart, just because that's where I heard the word to start with. But why this is important? It's a word that's used in Ukrainian Catholic University, some of their slogans, and there was an explosion of popularity in words related to this. Spilno meaning in common, being together. Spilkovatася, Suspilny, it's the public broadcaster. That all using this word that indicates deep interpersonal communication. And it's the civic, as I said, civics, the social organizations, live internet TV from the Maidan. He mentions an ad slogan, "I am a drop in the ocean," that became a meme on the Maidan, and it's a metaphor that shows the powerlessness of individual protest and the massive potency of collective action, which we certainly saw in the Revolution of Dignity. The next topic he talks about is civil society, which we discussed at great
Before
length.
we move on,
Yes,
from
go
Spilna,
Adam, go ahead.
Spilka. Do you know that word? It means union or
No, wait.
association or.
Oh,
So,
correct.
so isn't
That's
that
right.
neat? It's the root of that word as well. So it's just the root of the word organization or union as well.
Oh, that's very interesting. And also, it's one of the other things I just love about Ukraine is spilka as a diminutive. The diminutives are really an integral part of probably most Slavic languages. I know it mostly in Ukrainian. It gives sort of a charm because it's like you're talking about a little something. It means like a let's see, what's another one? Well, chlopets, right, is a boy. Chlopchik is like a little boy. It's a boy you love, you know. And anyway, so but those you find those diminutives all over the
Ditena
place.
versus Ditenka.
Yeah, exactly. You know, or I remember
It's like kid or cute little kid.
right, exactly. Or even I remember my friend Stas sent me a video of what had been a couple of years ago. It was like minus 17 or something. It was really, really cold and it snowed. And his comment, he shows this little video in the comment. He says, Yaka pahodka. And so pahoda means weather. Pahodka is a little weather. You know, it's like, look at this cute weather. Anyway, it's whatever. Okay, I can go on about Ukrainian all day, so I'm going to shut up. Anyway, all right, back to this. Okay, so the civil society appeared spontaneously on the Maidan. And civic activism and volunteerism has persisted largely as a reaction to Russian aggression. He points out and backs up with statistics something that I never would have guessed, which is that this is a new phenomenon. Grassroots philanthropy had been very, very rare in Ukraine before 2013, 2014. It's so much a part of, such a prominent part of Ukrainian life now. And this was something that, I mean, obviously was there latently, but this is something that developed as a result of the Maidan. And it's a huge difference. And Ukraine gives, in terms of charity, not just to helping each other up, but charity to you know, out in the rest of the world. Ukrainian citizens have one of the highest levels of support for philanthropy, and this is a poor country. These are not people who have a lot of disposable income, especially these days. So it was really a sea change in in how society was structured, and obviously the roots were all there. It could never have happened. Yeah, Adam, you also have a good comment here.
Oh, give me a minute.
Wake that screen up again. Shall we, Tracy? Why don't we go to you while Adam's getting his comment together? Go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you, Robin. I just wanted to mention my experience when I am in villages, when I was, should I say, in villages in Kharkiv, in the countryside and in rural Cherkasy, going to places where people have pretty much nothing, especially when you're going to villages where people as a community have been moved there as internally displaced people because their community has been destroyed. And we're trying to give them pizzas, bring them a little bit of, you know, practical help and a little bit of hope at the same time. And I was just absolutely overwhelmed by the amount of people, especially the babushkas, that wanted to give us, I mean, the incredible amounts of things. They would give us fruit, they would give us bags of plums that they'd spent, you know, a long time picking, all sorts of different fruits and watermelons and zucchini. We were given a great big massive bottle of, I don't know, some kind of spirits that they'd made themselves. I guess you call it moonshine, but it looked a bit more upscale than that. It had chilies in it and all sorts of wonderful things. And, you know, you couldn't say no. And these people have very, very little indeed. And I think that just speaks to what you're talking about, Robin, that, you know, that charity of helping each other, no matter how little that you've got. And that is really, really important to me, something I will never forget. And one woman bringing me a scarf that she had made herself by hand, and actually giving me a blessing as well, standing there and blessing me, which of course meant a great deal to me. And I just think, you know, that's very generous indeed. And as I said, you can't say no because they're incredibly insulted. So you have to take these things as well.
That's the other side of it. The weekend I spent with my friend Oleg's mom in Kiev. I have never eaten so much in my life because she made enough to feed an army, and I had to eat. I couldn't say I've had enough. I mean, it's just so it was absolutely, it was charming. I mean, if I had stayed there much longer, she would have had to expand the doors to get me out of the place. But yeah, it's also an interesting thing, you know, the reaction to terrible times. And think of the Holodomor when people had no food, you know. the Ukrainian reaction to that is not to hoard food; it's to share it even more with each other, and that's also an example of a mature society of a people. And I think part of it, Will isn't here, so I can say this. I think part of it is the Ukraine is a very religious country. I mean, and really religious, not the forms of religiosity, but the religious beliefs and concepts. And I think that has made a big difference in this attitude, and made a big difference in the development of this wonderful civic society that we admire so much at this point. I think it was definitely a part of it. Adam, are you ready with your comments
Which
now?
goes to my point of my note. And it's exactly what I saw too, Tracy, is that volunteerism is so strong in Ukraine right now. I think it'd be really interesting to find some polling data that reflects levels of volunteer activities throughout Ukraine versus other Western democracies. I would guess that the difference would be stark, especially after 2013. And I think that it would be a good data point against the Vatniks who are all like, oh, it's a proxy war, they're fighting to the last Ukrainian, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, look at these stats on people who volunteer for the war effort and how many people are going to PTA meetings and, cooking for the soccer team on the weekend. But, they're not, there's not as many of those folks here. And I think it goes back into that idea of hedonist, right? And I saw the same thing as Tracy. I was at Lviv Volunteer Kitchen one afternoon, and this little Baba rolled in her hatchback Lada from 1973, and the entire, I could not believe how many sacks of beets came out of this thing. And she was just really cute, and she just dropped all this food and left, and they're like, yeah, she grows that all herself. And every 2 months she comes and brings us a load like that. And she's from the villages, so there you go, Mychailo. It's everywhere. And yeah, and I think that in itself is the greatest data point of why we should support these folks because how much they're supporting themselves and how much they're showing us, how to do it and how to like Professor Snyder in On Tyranny, his lessons are, find an institution and protect it, volunteer, get involved in your community, all of it, and so hedonist to the max, guys.
Yeah, that's thank you. That's very true. Um, Yeah, and it's something, as I said, it's something I think that it will be of the benefit of the rest of Europe to learn more from. I remember a few years ago seeing the levels of philanthropy compared between the United States and Germany, and the German level was much lower, in part because with the overarching government, the attitude was the government's taking care of charities, so I don't have to. Um, so that would, I mean, certainly, if it's lower than the United States, I'm sure the level in the United States is lower than it is in Ukraine. So, you know, that, but it would be, hopefully, we'll see some statistics at some point. Okay, so, volunteerism, we're talking about civil society. And it particularly became stronger. It's sort of ironic. I mean, you look at the number of changes that have happened in Ukraine in the last few years, so many of the last 10, 11 years, so many of them were as a result of Russian aggression. The Russians have managed to instigate the exact opposite of what they wanted to. Patriotism in Ukraine has never been stronger. Commitment to each other has never been stronger. Not wanting to, yeah, agreed, Adam. Not wanting to let anybody else tell them what to do. I mean, this has never been stronger. Understanding that the Russians ain't their friends has never been stronger. It's a result of all of this. Um, so Vladimir Vladimirovich has done it to himself, and it's anyway. And on top of it all, a lot of the brain trust, and a lot of the best pop music and entertainers that all came from Ukraine, and all they've done is cut off their access to that now. So it serves them right. Anyway, okay. Not that I'm bitter. Anyway, so this, as I said, as we were talking about
I
this
am
new,
fuck them, suck.
Yeah, no, I know, actually, absolutely, yes. Yeah, I've seen, I don't know, have you seen, Slavoj Zizek recorded several addresses, short, messages in Russian to his fans in Russia, basically saying, "What the fuck are you people doing?" And it had no effect on anybody. It's I guess, I mean, certainly the obligation to others is sadly lacking in that society as well.
They are
Uh,
nihilists. They believe in nothing. Nothing.
oh yeah, but except they're big in the Russian Orthodox Church, but whatever anyway. Okay. So to get back to something positive, the civil society and civic activism that it rose on a mass scale, and as I was saying, especially the mobilization of resources for defense became a near universal priority with the Russian invasion. The average Ukrainian became a full-fledged agent of social life, and as you were saying, Adam, also the ladies in the villages. In Ben's movie, there's that scene of those ladies from some village making like 5 million Vareniki every day to send to the front lines, and that's what that's my friend's father who 3D prints parts for drones. This is becoming a full-fledged agent of social life. Each person, and we see in Ben's movie a lot of this is To the Zero Line is the movie I'm talking about. That the 80-year-old lady who can hardly walk, but she makes trench candles in her kitchen. The ladies who are making sandwiches for displaced people. The people, everyone doing whatever they could. People learning how to be combat medics, or the friend who took a weekend to learn to take a first aid course that was particularly about what to do in the case of massive bleeding, i.e., a bombing where people lose limbs and that kind of. What a horrible thing to have to do. But this is what as he calls, a full-fledged agent of social life. This is what individual Ukrainians choose to do as part of being part of society. Um, and as a result, also, there's an optimism and positive determination to affect change. This is very different in Ukraine than you find certainly in Russia and many the post-Soviet, uh, space generally. As he says, that you see in you much of this post-Soviet space is filled with fatalism and pessimism. You don't see that in Ukraine. It is, it's people put their head down and work, and there's a lot of optimism and determination to make things better. He quotes a sign on the Maidan, which I love, that said, "Please excuse the inconvenience. We're building a new country." That was the attitude, and that's what they were doing. I mean, there are people who say this is really the next Ukraine. It was different, even though there was not an overthrow of government as such. That really what came after Maidan was completely different than what had been there before. And something he points out, which we've heard before, which is really breathtaking, is that in 3 months of the Maidan demonstrations, not a single store was looted. And I believe that statistic is true. Not one single store was looted. No shop
Prityov
windows
claims
were
it as
broken.
well.
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it other places. I mean, and this is, I mean, it's as you said, it's peaceful activism and spontaneous serenity. This is what comes from a society where you're valuing your place in society, and your responsibility and respect for each other is very strong. Um, as he calls it, a brave new world that was both fair and just, even though still a work in progress. And this is the next word he comes up, another one of my favorites, spravedlivist, which means fairness, loosely. Sprava has to do with rules. But fairness not only in domestic affairs, um, there there was a call for fairness, and he points out and which is of course true, that Ukrainians felt very betrayed by the West as far as with the Budapest Memorandum, because although military intervention was not required by it, it certainly, as a matter of fairness, spravedlivo, it certainly is a moral requirement to because of what was agreed to, what Ukraine gave up as a result of the Budapest Memorandum. And this is absolutely the case, and I think, yeah, Adam, go ahead.
Well, I think part of hedonist, part of what the idea of hedonist, which is my favorite, it's going to fill my soul from now on. The spirit of hedonist is recognizing the spirit of laws as opposed to just trying to avoid the letters of them. You know what I'm saying? And that's what we. So we have this rules-based order that kind of denies the agency of people that would do everything they can to avoid it.
Yes, yeah, exactly, exactly. And in this way of looking at things, the fact that you have found a Weasley way to avoid it doesn't mean it's right. And that's something that I think we've lost certainly in some of my surroundings. This idea that even if you get away with it, it doesn't make it right.
Trump. Oh, excuse me.
God bless you. Oh my goodness. Okay, yes. One does have to laugh because otherwise, what are you going to do?
He won the election and they're dropping all the cases. That proves he was innocent. Right, Jim?
Excellent point, Adam. Thank you. Yes, yes. But I'm sure they're going to be screaming bloody murder that Joe Biden just pardoned Hunter Biden for something or other because
I hope he
what do they
pardons
say with that?
Vindman in advance too, because they're
That would be good.
obviously
Yes.
coming after people, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
And
Oh yes.
and it's so okay. I know we're in book club, but it's so Russo-phallic to accuse others and then immediately do that what you're accused of. Like, oh, they're so good at it.
Oh yeah. Well, like somebody said, if they didn't have double standards, they'd have no standards at all. I mean, that's funny, but it's unfortunately very true. Anyway, but as we were saying, spravedlivist, the word that means justice, but probably closer to fairness, does not permit of that. That just because you can weasel out of it doesn't make it right. It's harder. You have to be grown up when you believe these things. But okay, so as I said, justice is the word that it's mistranslated at, but it really means a moral and ethical concept, not a legal one. William.
Well, I disagree. So Hunter Biden's pardon completely reasonable, given the fact that the prosecution has completed. He's been convicted. A pardon is valid, and a pardon means you're excused from punishment for a crime for which you've either admitted guilt or being convicted, a la Jared Kushner's father, who's now been made the ambassador to France. So clearly, it doesn't
But
have to
that's
affect your.
different, Will. That's
It doesn't
different.
have to affect your future life. But the thing I take objection to is under no circumstance should Alexander Vindman be pardoned for anything because he hasn't done anything wrong, nor has he been convicted. Unfortunately, if the Trump administration or anybody else wants to go after him, he is a big man. He is a strong person. He unfortunately, if they are going to try to pursue him, he shouldn't be pardoned because that's admitting guilt. You only get a pardon once you've admitted guilt for something. Vindman did nothing wrong. He's phenomenally honorable, and I think he will be willing to take the test if necessary, because the accusations made by Musk and others are a complete nothing burger. And while we should stand to support Alexander Vindman as much as possible. I certainly will. I don't believe he ought to be falsely convicted of anything and require a pardon because he didn't do anything wrong. He did absolutely everything right, and being a whistleblower shouldn't be punished. But if they want to try to pursue that, let them try, because their hearings previously were nothing. They have nothing because there isn't anything there, and it will tie up and waste the time of the Trump administration if they want to try to pursue it. Call their bluff would be my advice to Alexander Vindman, which I have actually provided that to him directly. But of course, I'm sure he didn't read it because I'm nobody.
No,
Not
thank
true.
you.
Not true, Willibuster. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm just worried about the guy, and I feel like we're on the same page. Sorry, Robin.
No, no, no. I just think I'm going to say, Will, it's a valid point. I think, yeah, Adam. I think what you were aiming for is to keep the guy from being tormented. But yeah, it is. See, this is unfortunately the way our legal system is set up is you can use it to you know, to you can to some extent it can be used to torment people. In the end, it'll work out, but it's going to cost money in the meantime, and there'll be fundraisers and whatever if they do decide to go after him. But Will is right; he did nothing wrong, so there is not that isn't a valid reason for a pardon. But it would be nice if somehow he could be insulated from that. But yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think it's not possible in the system without him admitting to having done something wrong, which he didn't. Oh well. Okay. Okay, we're going to go back to Spravedlivest, where fairness or justice meaning fairness. Um, okay. Um, and this fairness as such is since it's a moral ethical concept, it has to be achieved through a righteous community and natural law. It's not by a state necessarily, because the state can be hijacked, as we're talking about here. The legal system can be used to nefarious ends at times. Um, for practical governance under this concept, you need an impartial judiciary, and this is something that is still a work in progress in Ukraine. There there are
Sorry.
folks, one of the things that you don't know until you're a co-host is what goes on in the back channels with comments. I'm sorry. But anyway, um, yeah. Well, as he points out here, it's as the dictatorial laws demonstrated, a statute law does not always conform to justice and fairness. Post Maidan, the feeling that righteous fairness was actually possible, but we're still working on reform of the judicial system, and this is something that unfortunately really lagged, and there are suspicions under Poroshenko why it was allowed to lag as much as it did. Things have gotten better since then, but it's still the legal system is a tough thing to reform, particularly since you need a lot of staff. And you need judges, and they have to be trained. You can't just put anybody in the legal training, and there are not that many. If you get rid of everybody who's there under the old system, you're not going to have enough people to populate the system. So it's as I said, still a work in progress. But I think they're going to get there. And Ukraine's contribution to civilization development here is that distinction between of fairness as opposed to legality. That the rule of law has to include fairness. And yes, Adam.
Once again, I think Professor Snyder has taken some notes on this chapter.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's interesting that in a group of scholars of Ukraine, there really doesn't seem to be a lot of rivalry. There's a lot people seem to read each other. It's interesting. Yeah, they definitely have reached many of the same conclusions. All right. The next section, we're getting to the end of our time here, is called horizontalization, which I spelled wrong in the outline. My apologies. It's a long word.
Is it even a
Horizontal,
real word?
God only knows. Well,
Because
spell
like
check doesn't think so.
hierarchy doesn't like this hierarchical stuff he has. Yeah, spell check don't like it.
I actually looked up hierarchical, and he's not the only one who uses that word. I mean, the sociologists have a language all their own. Yeah, so that's yeah. Yeah, some of this, I really, like I said, I think with longing of Herzog and Snyder and their ability to write clear sentences. I mean, I think this has been a wonderful book. I mean, and not to belittle it, but he and this chapter somehow, maybe it just wasn't edited as well as the rest of the book because a lot of the jargon has crept in here. Anyway, and I hope I'm not using too much of it. I've tried to, figure out what it meant and put it in normal English. Anyway, okay, horizontal organization. Um, this is okay. Dignity and fairness are not only demands, but it was actually the ideology of dignity and fairness was practiced in the protest camp and in daily lives. And as we're talking about the lack of looting, for example, and the mutuality, community, and belief in the possibility of a common good, meant inclusiveness and a consensual culture. And we certainly have saw that in what we know about what went on in the Maidan. The massive numbers of people coming in to bring food, the businessmen who brought in um, insulated mats for people to sleep on, so they weren't right on the cold stones. People bringing legal free legal services being provided by local lawyers, medical clinics being set up. All of that was all horizontal management, and as he calls it, you said hierarchical. We'll use that word too. Um, um, but this, and as everything has, it was also a massive management problem because both on the Maidan and in the military, and I love this wording. This is where he says, within the military in the East during the invasion, compliance with order was not consequential of their receipt. So, in other words, people didn't follow orders. Everybody was was being empowered to make their own decisions. It was a bit of a problem, but at the same time, it was that ability, that insistence on making decisions on the ground that allowed and still allows. It has now become part of the Ukrainian military, that lower echelon commanders are given the power to make decisions based on local conditions on the ground. They don't have to get all their orders from Kiev the way the Russian army does. The Russian army is very ossified sometimes because nobody's willing to make a decision. It has to go at many levels. In Ukraine, and I think this is the result of the Maidan we see in the military still. I mean, it still has its issues, and there still is the old Soviet hangover in places, but a lot more decision making is given to commanders of smaller groups in the field where they can see and react immediately to changes. And this is part of why they're doing as well as they are. Um, anyway, okay. Okay, just a few other little things, and then we have to get out of here. As we said before, there's the widespread distrust in the chain of command inside and outside of the military. I think less now as people more responsible and consequent people are in higher ranks. And we talked about there's a distinction between country and state. Patriotism in this area meant love of country, but it could also mean hatred of the state. And this was rooted in the revolutionary discourse on the Maidan that personal freedom was valued above all, freedom of speech, the right of assembly, personal liberty to manage your own affairs. And he says, and I think it's right, he links this quite strongly to the ideology of the Zaporozhian Cossacks, that also was very, very inclusive society, very people had the ability to affect decisions. It wasn't a hierarchical society. And we'll leave your comment, Adam, and I think with that we're going to have to continue next week.
It was so cogent. Yes, those dang freedom-loving Cossacks had no idea what they were starting on that siege so many centuries ago. Just a lot of hierarchical, community-based butt kicking.
Yep. Yeah, and with that, folks, we're getting close to the end of the chapter. Next week, yeah.
Tracy just shot
Adam.
up a hand.
Oh, no, go ahead, Tracy. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Sorry, I won't keep you long, but I just thought really we should mention, as it's the 1st of December, that is the day in 1991 that a referendum was held in Ukraine. And the people basically, as most of you probably know already, they voted for the proclamation of independence of Ukraine in a nationwide referendum. I've got some information here from Spravdy, which I'm going to post after we close so that people can see it. I think it's really important because as they say here, lots of this propaganda, this Russian propaganda, is countered by this information that they share here. 28,804,000 Ukrainians, or 90.32%, answered the question in the affirmative. So, of course, they voted for yes. And really, I think it's just absolutely incredible that, we are where we are today, all this time later, when probably many of you that are as old as me will remember these days, and remember that, I thought that Ukraine were going to really gain the independence that they have today in those days. But of course, unfortunately, it took a little bit longer, and the events of 1991 disprove the Russian narrative that there has always been a split in the East and West as well, because they give the percentages here of what everybody voted for. So I'm not going to go through it all, because we are, of course, at the end of the segment, but I just wanted to let everybody know and mark that occasion, and I will post that information so everybody can have a look and share that widely and counter that Russian propaganda.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. It's no matter how many times we talk about it, it always bears repeating, because this is one of those, those really vile lies that continues on and on about the divide between Russian and Ukrainian-speaking Ukrainians, which was never as pronounced as they tried to say it was, and certainly is not now. It is not. That is not the issue at all. Anyway, okay, with that, and I would just say thank God for the world that Ukraine became independent in 1991, and it's now a state under attack, but it's a wonderful, mature society with a lot to give the world. And well, get that money going in, folks. Let me just see. Thank you. They're spending your money, Adam. Thank you, folks.
Дуже добре.
and okay. Okay, and that's that. So I'm going to say good night. Adam, any closing thoughts before we close out?
No, thanks for a great discussion, everybody, and Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam
Heroyam
Slava.
Slava.
And skoro побачимо. So see you soon. Good night, everyone.
Welcome to For the Radio. Slava Ukraini. Welcome to For the Radio. Slava Ukraini.